Isn't it great to have plenty of rain? That's why Melbourne always looks so good, and I think we're catching up in Queensland. My name is Dennis Stevenson, and it's my pleasure to be the opening speaker. Who's got cancer? Who's got cancer cells? Everyone has. Right. So we've all got cancer, right? We've all got everything. People sometimes are a bit worried about germs. And yet if you look in water and see all the living things in there, you'd be horrified and never touch a drop of it. And yet that's basically what we're made from. So it's not so much what we eat in our lives. I think the major cause of cancer and all illness is hardening of the attitudes. And that's what gets us. Who's happy? Peter's got two hands up. We've got some people. Who's not sure? If you're not sure, there's a bit of movement available. That is the thing to do. 4 years ago in August, I was leasing a house in Hamilton, Brisbane, and it was one cold August morning and I was in the bath trying to warm up, and I thought, what'll I do with all my things, all the stuff? And I thought of different things. I thought I could sell it, I could move to another place and so on. And I had the thought that I could give it all away. And by the end of the day, I decided that that wasn't one of your brighter thoughts, Dennis. So I left that. And a couple of weeks went on, the lease was coming up to an end, and I was thinking about what I'd thought about earlier, when I had that thought to give it all away. And that really excited me at the time, and I remembered that excitement. So I thought, okay, I'll give it all away. So I told the media, and they told people, and on that Saturday morning, it went over the weekend, but basically, as you can understand, the Saturday morning was the major time when I gave all these things away. Now, a lot of people came along and many thought there was a catch. They thought, well, nobody's just going to give all these stuff away. There's something going on here. And Madonna King asked me later on at the Happiness Conference. Who's been to the Happiness Conference? Every year they hold a happiness conference in Australia, and the Dalai Lama was out a couple of years ago, and I got a phone call from Madonna King's producer. She was on the radio, ABC at the time, and she said she'd known about what I'd done in giving things away, and she said, we want to have an interview forum running at the side, and not inside on the stage, but outside, and we want to get 4 people that seem happy. Now I laughed. Why did I laugh? Well, actually, it was because I was happy. Because when someone says, we're looking for people that seem happy, that was funny. And I said to, I think it was Fiona, I said, you don't think there are any people that are happy? And most people don't. And on this planet, in this dimension, the way we think, what we create with our thoughts, I think it's fair enough. You don't think too many people are happy, and with good reason, because we're not creating it. And Madonna King said, on that day when you gave everything away, were some people a little bit doubtful about that? I said, yes. And she said, well, what did you, at the end of the time, what was left? I said, it was an interesting thing, because I was doing an interview on the radio, and you could hear the echo inside the house, because virtually everything had been gone. Later on, a couple of years later, I realized that was the best thing I'd ever done in my life. Now, some people might think, he's probably never done anything worthwhile. I've done lots of things, but that was the one. And my niece was with the family, and we were talking about attitudes in life and so on, and she has a game she plays with friends whereby one of the questions is, what's the best thing you've ever done in your life? And immediately she asked that, this flashed into mind. And I realized at that time that that was it. When I was talking to Madonna King later on, she said, so Dennis, are you still rich? I said, I've got wealth beyond belief. What did I mean? Real wealth, not artificial money. I said, but if you're talking about money, that's another matter. And many times in my life, particularly over the last few years, I've looked again and again at the wealth I have that you cannot buy with money. I think you can only buy it with heart. You can only buy it with love, because that's who we are. We are love. I remember Wayne Dwyer talking about having no upsets in life. He said, I don't get upset about anything. He said, you can squeeze and squeeze and squeeze like an orange, and you get nothing but orange juice. He said, you squeeze me, you get nothing but love. There's nothing else in there. And I always thought that was a great analogy, because in truth, that's all that we are. And you say, well, who'd like to know how to be love and nothing else? It's simple. Who can tell me? Be yourself. All right? How do you be yourself? Many people have asked me, why are you happy? And it's so simple. We tend not to think of it. I'm happy because I only do what makes me happy. And people think, oh yes, but I've got to do this and I've got to do that and then there's this and all the rest of it. And it's not true. Who's got children? Okay. You think you have to look after them, don't you? You don't have to. Truly, you don't have to. But it probably excites you to look after them. And that's just following your passion in life. But if I had children and I wasn't passionate about certain things, I'd let them have a holiday with somebody, because that would be the right thing to do. Who believes there is a being or something that we refer to as God, Allah, universal consciousness, the great way, etc.? Who believes that such a creative being exists? Okay, how does that creative being communicate to us individually? How? Through your heart. Who knows what that means? Because I don't, right? I mean, what's that mean? I know we've got a heart, but what do you mean through your heart? Have you got to go along to a doctor and get him to hook it up, and does it beat differently or something like that? So, who knows how Creator communicates with us? Through your thought patterns? Okay. It's even more simple than that. Who's ever felt excited about anything? Yes, Peter threw his arms up. Indeed. Haven't we all felt excited about something? Ladies might be excited about buying a few new pairs of shoes and getting their colours done so they can find out those colours in life that love them, and then they quickly change over to what they love when they find out what it does. So there are many things. There's 1,000,001 things we can be excited about in life. What is that excitement? What's the feeling of that excitement? Have you got any ideas? What's the feeling of it? How do we know it excites us? Sorry? Yes, smiling, being joyful. It's actually a vibration, right? That comes to us, and it is the feeling of excitement. That's what it is. It's a vibration coming from whoever you perceive as being God. And it's there all the time. People have asked me if I'm religious. I tell them I'm spiritual. They've asked me, do I communicate with God? Yes, I always go direct. I don't go via someone else. A couple of reasons. One, they normally want a fee. Secondly, they often have a bias. If they got the real communication, they might not give it all to me because I mightn't go to the church anymore if I could go directly. So I think it's simple. Go direct and just follow that excitement. When do we follow that excitement, that passion in our lives? When? Sorry? All the time. Perfect. All the time. We have all experienced this again and again and again and again and again. People think they can remember times when it's happened. It's happened thousands of times for every one of us. We've ignored most of them because we don't see the message. I was driving up from Melbourne. I was visiting Melbourne. I visited down there for about 10 years. I just refused to say I was living there because I knew I'd end up in the sun, and I did. So I was driving up and I got tired and I parked on the left-hand side of the Pacific Highway, and about having a lovely sleep, and about 2 o'clock in the morning there was a banging on the window, and a couple of policy enforcers, a couple of police officers, were banging on the window asking me if I was okay. They said, "We just want to check if you're all right." I said, "I was fine before you." No, I said I was fine. And the young constable said, "And by the way, anytime you get tired, it's really best to go into a lay-by instead of parking on the side of the road." I said, "Yeah, thanks." Botherers. Anyway, a few weeks later, I was back down in Melbourne. I was coming up again. I got tired. I don't know if it was the same spot. So what did I do? Kept driving. No, I didn't keep driving. What did I do? Tell me. Where did I pull over? Side of the road. No, but I would have pulled over in a lay-by, wouldn't I? I'm a sad case. So I pulled over on the side of the road. 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up to an explosion. A girl had smashed into my car as she was driving up the highway. And people say, "How would you like to die?" I said, "I'd like to die like my grandpa, peacefully in his sleep," as all the passengers were screaming. So she fell asleep and just ran into my car. What were the police doing in that first instance?
Pre-warning.
Pre-warning me. That's a bit far-fetched, isn't it? You mean to say they came along and woke me up to let me know that in the future, if there is any future, and it's not all now, that I need to park on a lay-by instead of parking in the... What are the odds? Spiritual cops, there. What are the odds? 1,000,000,000 to 1? 1,000,000,000,000 to 1. Right? Whatever. How would you know? It's just a message. They're there all the time. You'll look at something in the paper and it'll say, travel to Egypt, right? And you might have been having a thought about that. And then you go to the bookstore and there's a special on Lonely Planet's travel Guide to Egypt. They usually come in as 3. I give away free books at the Organic Market in Brisbane at Northey Street, Downey Park every Sunday morning. And one of the books is the major investigation of nutrition on the planet. It's called the China Study. One day, 2 months ago, on the Sunday, someone came up and looked at the book and he said, "That's a really good book." I said, "Yeah, it is." And someone else came up and he said, "I've got that book on audio tape." I said, "Oh, that'd be good to listen to." And someone else came up and said, "I really enjoyed that book." This is paraphrasing. I didn't record it, right? But that was 3 people. So what did I do? No. I told you I'm a sorry case, right? A 4th person came up on that Sunday. Nobody had ever done this before with that book. I got a whole table of the world's best books, right? That's what my signs say. Reading room, the world's best books. You can't take them. You can look at them. You sit down and have a look at them. And it took the 4th. With the 4th, I thought, aha, it's a message. So I read it. Good book. How many of these situations do you think might have happened in my life that I know about? Thousands and thousands and thousands. Right? Would you give me a 5-minute? Thanks, Lockie. And I am getting pretty good these days in picking them up. I don't care what happens. I live with some interesting slogans. One is, everything's going according to plan. Now, when I tell that to a lot of people, they know, of course, that I don't mean everything. But I do. I don't care whether the house burns down, you have a car accident. I wrote 2 cars off like that, right? I don't care whether someone in the family dies, even if they're 1 year old. I think everything's going according to plan. Can we die?
Yeah.
We can?
Yeah. Well, our bodies die.
Ah! Look, I understand that, right? And I had a pair of shoes once, and they died, right? It was sad. I had a little funeral, got some flowers. Well, not really, but that's the same thing, right? This is just a creation that we are having fun with. You come down here and you forget everything. Why do you forget everything? Sorry? Yeah, got Alzheimer's, drinking too much of the fluoridated water. It's a good point. And we do have Alzheimer's when we come down to the planet Earth because you have to forget everything. Well, not everything, right? It's no good being God on Earth. You would know everything that was going to happen. I mean, by about lunchtime, you'd think, oh, I'm getting out of here. This is no fun. And what being wants to do is experience. When we come to this planet, what do we want to experience? Tell me.
Physical aspects.
Okay.
Joy.
Joy, yes. What else do we...
Love.
What else do we want to experience? Sorry? Happiness? Yes.
Physical interaction.
What's wrong with hate and fear and frustration and terror? Who said we're only here to experience happiness and joy? Where on earth did that thought come from? Because nothing could be further from the truth. We are here to experience, that's it, everything, including cancer. Who thinks they might, or people might have decided to experience cancer? Who thinks that? Give me some feedback and let me know if I'm going the wrong way.
I did have it.
You did have it? As a result of that, how did you change?
Massively.
Massively. So what, you got worse? You learned less? You felt bad about life?
No,
What was the other?
learned more. Went back to my spiritual
Right?
anchor
And
yeah,
exactly.
changed my whole life. My whole life. So
It's a wake-up call. Isn't it beautiful? Who knows anything about the politics of this planet? Who knows there's a push, and has been for a long time, for a new international economic order? Or if you like, totalitarianism. Who knows that? Okay, most people. All right? And of course, it's where they give the orders and we are subservient. Who thinks that's a good thing? Why do I think that's a good thing?
tell us why.
I told you earlier. What did I say?
You're a sad case.
I am a sad case. That's not the reason. I said because everything's going according to plan. Now, was the cancer beneficial for you?
Yes.
Yes. We are perfectly loving to everybody, aren't we? In your life, you love everybody, including yourself. You always help people whenever you can help. Okay? Don't you? You're hesitating? Of course we don't. Okay? My view is, if you can help, help. If you need help, ask. And that's what I do. So if I come up Asker and ask you something, you'll know what's going on. My second view is, nothing is too good to be true. And once again, people think I use words loosely, but I don't. I am very specific in my communication. Nothing is too good to be true. Who would like to have a house that they could live in without paying? Who's lived in a house by themselves as such without paying? Well done. And this isn't the first. I moved out this morning. And I'm going to find another one. In between time, I'm staying with someone that it was an acquaintance who's in Coomera. Got a lovely house down there. Very attractive. I'm quite happy there. He gave me a room. He said, until the place sells. I said, I can help you sell it. And I can. So there was something that he mentioned that led me to believe the reason I didn't get a house straight off was because he needed some help. He's got a few bob, but he's going through a situation with the banks on foreclosure. See, the banks don't lend us anything of value. They don't give us any of their own money, if there was such a thing as money. And we can handle these. And some of us are working on it. And I'm working on it. So I'll have a wonderful opportunity to do that for him. And I wanted to do that. I thought, I know we can handle tax very easily, right? Tax is voluntary in Australia. It's very easy to handle, not to pay taxes. Basically income tax. If someone charges you 10% on a lolly, it's not something you're really going to spend a lot of time handling the tax. You're not avoiding it, you're just directing it. So we can handle tax easy. We can handle credit card debt. It's easy to handle credit card debt by communicating with the banks or credit card facility in writing and asking them questions that they cannot and will not answer. Thereby, their response, which is silence, creates a contract with us. So we can do that one easily. Having a bit of trouble with Spur, State Penalties Enforcement Registry, $50 parking fine. It's a lot easier handling 50,000 with a credit card company, as I helped someone 4 years ago to do. So it's a perfect place for me at the moment. And I was with a beautiful Swiss lady for 9 years. This was 9 years ago. No, it wasn't yesterday she left. She left. 9 years ago is now. And we're going to be back together again. And I had a free house up in Brisbane. And she said, it needs to be in Brunswick Heads. Who knows Brunswick Heads in the Northern Rivers, New South Wales? Everybody that knows Brunswick says, that's a nice spot. I used to go there for holidays and whatever. It's a great spot. So I said, well, look, I've got a free house, free electricity, etc., in the place I'm in at the moment. Why don't you come up to Brisbane? And then we can get another place later on. And she said, it's got to be Brunswick Heads. And I thought that was a little bit unreasonable at the time. Didn't make a lot of sense. But over the 9 years when we weren't together as such, saw each other occasionally. She went overseas, back to Switzerland and so on. In that 9 years, I never made her wrong. I didn't do it. Notwithstanding all the reasons you might think, I will. It's her fault, etc., etc. Never did it. One time she said she wanted to do some writing, so I bought her a new Mac computer, sent it across to Switzerland as a surprise. I only ever supported her. I learned about love. I took the opportunity. I could have gone the other way. And she said, it's got to be Brunswick Heads. And I thought, well, okay, if that's where she wants to go, we'll make it Brunswick Heads. And I was telling someone this at the organic market on Sunday morning, and I suddenly had the realization that though she loves Brunswick Heads, it wasn't her. She was saying it needed to be Brunswick Heads. Who was it for? For me. Isn't that interesting? What an interesting thought. She didn't know it was for me, but when I had this thought, I knew. We're all spiritual, we can know anything. And I was just explaining it to somebody and I thought, wait a minute, it's for me. And if anybody had said, would you rather be in Brisbane or Brunswick Heads? I'd have said, look, I'm really happy in Brisbane. I open up my free shop every year, give away thousands of presents. I borrow a shop and so on, doesn't cost anything. And I also go along to the markets on Sunday morning at Northey Street, Windsor. So I'm really having a good time in Brisbane. But if someone had gotten an answer to their question, and very few of us do that, get answers to your questions. And they said, would you rather live in Brunswick Heads or Brisbane? I'd rather live in Brunswick Heads. No question. So, but I wasn't going to go down to Brunswick Heads. I'm going to stay in Brisbane because I was helping. What's closest to my heart, what excites me? Brunswick Heads. Got some wonderful things to create down there. How do I know there's wonderful things to create down there? How do I know that?
Human beings live down there.
That's true.
Your source.
My sauce? Okay. I do have some vegetarian pies and I do put sauce on them sometimes. Right? It's true.
Your spiritual source then.
A spiritual sauce. Okay. How I know anything in my life is because it excites me. Right? I know that that's where I'm meant to be because I only do what excites me. I'm pretty simple. Right? I've got to get a lot of messages coming in sometimes. And that's so I know what I'm meant to do. Who decides what we are meant to do? Who? Our Creator. Okay? Who is Creator? Does the Bible, and I haven't read it, but I've heard some good quotes from it, does the Bible not say that we are children of God? Most of you said you had children before. Are they not similar to you? Do they not have the same abilities as you? Did the Bible not say, quoting Jesus, that we in reference to his miracles, we could do all he did and greater. Who's read the Bible? There you go. Does it say that? Yep. Thank you for the confirmation. I can't find the quote. Right, you will direct me to it. Isn't that amazing? Not only what he did, but greater. So, are we not God? Oh, that's a sacrilegious thing to say.
We're not. We're in God's eyes.
Okay. So,
We're born of the flesh, not of the spirit.
there are many, many views, and isn't it wonderful that we can come together in loving chat without looking at someone with a different view and separating from them? Because the one thing that keeps us apart from ourselves and from God is this false illusion of separation. It's only false. We are one, right? And when it comes to cancer, when it comes to any illness, I see it's a message. Doesn't matter what it is. Who knows where you can actually read the messages? Someone put a book out on that? Who's read Louise Hay's little blue book, $13 odd, only a thin one, called Heal Your Body? Who's looked at that one? I find that the Bible for health matters. You look under there, and I had a pain in the stomach at one time. I was in Canberra, and it was killing me, and it wouldn't go away. It was there for weeks, and I just felt so washed out. And I'd read in the little blue book what it said. It was about forgiveness. And I looked at it every which way I could, and it didn't help me. I thought, yeah, I forgive people easily. It's not a problem. It doesn't really work, you know. And I was really washed out. You know how you get when you've been ill and you think, oh, terrible. So I thought I'll get a body massage. That'll help. So I got a recommendation to someone, lady in the 60s, and I went along to her house. She worked from home, and she sat me down, and instead of giving me the massage, she started talking to me about what it all meant. And I'm sitting there listening. I say, yeah, I've had a look at this. I thought, bloody hell, I didn't come here for a lecture. I came here for a body massage. Anyway, got on the table. 10 minutes later, I got it. It wasn't forgiving other people. What was it? Forgiving me. Because I didn't do that well. I used to think it's Dennis's responsibility, Dennis's fault, and so on. And that pain in my stomach was not going to go away, because I went to see someone really spiritual, one of the most capable people on the planet, to give a bit of help. And they said, something you've got to go through. I said, how about I go through it later on? And that wasn't any good. So what I've found is that in all these situations, there are messages coming in. They come in at a rate of knots. So if you've got cancer, arthritis, asthma, well, I could sit here for the rest of the day naming them. I couldn't remember that many. But doctors create them left, right, and centre. They got one here and another one here and another one here, so they can have different diseases, uncomfortablenesses. And so that's the situation, all right? I'm going to have a chat with you when we finish up later on today, and I look forward to that. So I just leave you with a summary of what I said. One, I feel that everything is going according to plan. I feel that nothing is too good to be true. You can have cancer in the 55th stage, if there was such a thing, and it could be handled like that. We are very powerful. We're connected to power, and so on. So let's be positive. Let's keep the creative ideas there that we would want to have, and not the others, if we ever have someone in the family or friends that have cancer. Let's not when you go in and see them in hospital and they look half of them what they were originally, let's not decide that they look terrible and change the way we do and go, right? Let's just be really positive and help them. So thank you very much indeed for your attention. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. I appreciate the effort you put in. And my name is Laszlo, and my goal is, with seminars, as it is this one, to help educate people, give them an opportunity to see certain views of life from a different angle, different perspective. I never rehearse, I never plan as such what I'm going to say. Always speak from the heart. Because when I speak from the heart, I feel the truth comes from it. If I try to organize a speech, it doesn't really come out the way I would like to get it across to people where it's all about. The mission, what I'm trying to do in this life, to open up people's eyes, people's mind, to see life from a different angle, different perspective, about health, about happiness, about wealth, about interconnection in between people, within the heart, within the mind, create friends in between enemies, bring everybody together. And that's also about Australia, about America, different continents around the world. I think it's important for us, especially these days when we have this internet opportunity, to talk to everybody, to create a different environment, and let's see what's out there. Because maybe what we have in Australia as knowledge, as information was given or gets given through the media, doesn't necessarily has the same information maybe in Europe, maybe in Germany, maybe in America, maybe in Hungary, where I'm come from originally. We need to look at all aspects, because what we know here may be only a very limited information what European people know over there, because in some cases they much ahead of Australian standards when it comes to health, when it comes to politics sometimes. But I would like to stay on the subject of health at this stage, because I think cancer is an issue, different illnesses is an issue, because people looking for answers, people starting to ask questions. Why? What is the treatment? What can we do? Not just to have a solution to maintain our health, but also if we have an illness, try to find an answer how to get rid of it. Because there's many avenues we can find, and if you have a daughter, if you have a son, or mum, or dad, or grandma, or even a lot of people love their pets, if their pet gets sick, they go see a vet, get operation or get different treatments. Everybody has the love in the heart to reach for the better, look for a different answer, because there's not always just one answer for any condition to be treated. And I think, first of all, you need to, in my perspective, I think we need to look at the state with your health where you were, say, a month before your illness being discovered. What were you doing? What was your emotional state? What were your interaction with people? What trauma did it cause? Maybe there's a possibility. And just the health itself, in my perspective, if you are stressed, you feel the difference. Stress is a major cause in my understanding. I mean, I can quote maybe on Bruce Lipton. He's one of the person I like to sort of quote on when the biology of belief. He touches on the point that many times when you have a stressed environment, immediately or even your mindset, your thinking completely changes. And what happens when you are stressed, according to his knowledge and discoveries, your immune system really goes down to the sleep mode. When it goes to sleep mode, what do? your immune system, because it's in a sleep mode, according to him, everything what's within your system, could be an illness, a virus, anything like that, your immune system is not able to actually maintain the same level of the health before the stress. So when it comes back into an active mode, it finds itself with a lot of pressure to deal with, a lot of surprises, and what happens? The immune system goes crazy, so you feel really ill because the immune system has too much to deal with. So you get tired, you get maybe stressed even more because it's like a chain reaction. But it's just my understanding, interpreting Bruce Lipton's findings and his 40 years of experience in the industry. And so basically, back to my goal, to look at every single aspect of the foundation of your system. You've got organs, a lot of organs. All needs to be maintained, from my perspective. The way I do it, I search, investigate, looking for answers for all questions. I have the passion to help people. I think my journey became on this earth to stand up in front of people and ask them, think about it. Please think. Don't just take one answer. Investigate. Maybe that answer is one, but the other one will be an opposite of it. So you have to make your mind up. Listen to your gut feeling. Listen to your heart, what you feel great about it. So that was sort of the introduction from me, from my heart, where I'm coming from. And to maintain your health, I think you need to look at a lot of aspects. And I think one of the main speakers, a very great presenter, who could talk to you about magnesium, is maybe a great solution to maintain your health. But because I'm not expert on magnesium, I'll leave it up to her to talk about it, and her perspective will be giving you a different view, what you can look at and what you can search for, what you can listen to, what you can learn from. And I think she's great, she's fantastic, and I would like to proudly introduce her, Sandy Sanderson, if you are ready.
I'm just getting wired up. Oh, can everyone hear me?
Yeah.
Well, thank you for having me, Laszlo. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you all for coming. Now, this room would have been quite full had all the people that bought tickets actually come and braved the rain and shown up. But you know what? I'm not disappointed. To carry on from what Dennis said, exactly the right people that needed to be here came. And for everyone that did show up, you will get information today which will be totally life-changing. Simply because it's the truth, and the truth is simple. And when we get the truth, we can make the right decisions. And so the point is not to feel stressed or angry or disappointed, because that releases very dangerous chemicals into the system which are corrosive, which eat you up, which cause disease and illness. And so the first strategy for good health is to have a good frame of mind and to have the right strategies of thinking. And just one more thing on Dennis's topic. I love the Dalai Lama's quote when he was asked, why shouldn't we worry? Look at the world. And he said, I never worry. He said, because if there's something that you can do about it, you can do something about it, so there's no need to worry. If there's something you can't do about it, why worry? Because you can't do anything about it. So in either case, there's no need to worry. And so what do counselors and psychologists teach us or help us to do? That is let go and accept things we can't change. Because we really live in a world today which is fixed on structures. It has to be this way, this high, this colour, and we get caught up in the have-tos and all the rules, because I don't know if you know, but Dennis in his previous life was policeman, a parliamentarian. He was really entrenched in the legislative system of structure and rules, and you have to do it this way and not that way. And what happens is, because life is really different, it's kind of messy, and a lot of things happen not according to the rules. We feel stress and tension when it's not the way it's supposed to be, or the way we want to control it to be. And the stress and the tension that's caused in the body actually has a physical, chemical result or manifestation. So if we can control the way we think and change our strategies of thinking, we have a sense of liberation, we feel free and much happier. And so I'm going to talk to you more about what happens on a chemical level at the very fundamental physical level of our being in this body, and how to do things so that you maintain your vehicle with all the ingredients and things that it needs in order to run properly, so that you can drive it better and it does what you want it to do. Then you have a sense of freedom. You feel in control of yourself. That's important. It's not that control is bad, because you can't control other people and you can't control the world, but you can control yourself and how you do things and how you think. And that's all we really meant to do. If other people are looking at you saying, well, that's working, they'll copy. So that's their business if they want to do that. But you can never, ever give it to people. You can't make them do anything. So just give up before you even start. Anyway, before I get to that level of science, I'll just give you a little bit of my background. I have a Bachelor of Arts degree with postgrad studies in business and marketing. So I used to have a publishing business. For 11 years on the Gold Coast, I produced a magazine, and the print industry is very demanding. It has lots of deadlines. Unfortunately, they're not lifelines, they're deadlines, because there's a point and you have to get things done on that point. And there were so many people I had to control. I had to control the advertisers to send me in their words and their pictures so I could get the ads done and write the editorials. And if they were late, then there was a ballooning effect, and we had to work overtime, and we couldn't be late for the printer, because if the printer didn't get it on time, he couldn't give it to the distributor on time, the letterboxes wouldn't get done on time, and it was a monthly magazine. So I was quite young and healthy and fit. I didn't smoke. I ate well, fresh, healthy, organic foods, very health conscious. Because I grew up in Sydney on fluoridated water, so I had early developed symptoms of IBS, and I had to do lots of compensatory things.
What's IBS?
Irritable bowel syndrome. Thank you. So I learned to pay attention to my health early. Oh, and that's another thing you've got to do, listen to your body. Because the reason we have pain, the reason things go wrong is there's a message from the body talking to you. If you learn to go inward and listen to those messages, it's like an airline pilot. You have a dashboard and there's lights and dials and things all in front of you. Your goal is to get from destination to the destination, but then the red light goes on over here, and it's the fuel light. Oh, you're a little bit too low on the fuel and the red light's flashing. What do? Ignore it? I really don't want that light to be on. No thanks. Does that help you get to your destination? No. Because you have to pay attention to the signals so that you can take some kind of evasive action, maybe change the course, get to a shorter distance away, do something, have some kind of action to compensate for whatever the thing is that's going wrong. And so in a sense, we're doing the same with our body. We're the pilot and the body gives us signals. When we need to change something, we need to pay attention to what the signals are. And I think that's the number one thing people don't do enough of today. They just ignore, or they'll get some tablets, some painkillers. They'll just cover up the signals because they want to ignore it. It shouldn't be there. I don't want it there. But you know, ignorance isn't bliss. Just because you cover something up doesn't mean it's not still there, getting worse, because you're not paying attention to it. So attitude is very important, and that's what I did wrong was I wasn't listening to my body. And my print business, I had lots of symptoms starting to pop up because I would do 24 hours round the clock. I even did a few 48 hours round the clock. And you know, I didn't do drugs, but they say that the chemicals the body releases to stay awake when it should be sleeping are very similar to speed. And so I had the shakes and, you know, that constant activity where you just can't shut down. It's like, and then an altered state of reality. It's a really horrible, horrible feeling. And then you finally go to sleep and you wake up with the most massive headache and you just feel like crap for days. And I thought at the time I could bounce back, but you don't realize the damage that you do. And I was doing a lot of damage to my adrenals because every time you feel the stress and the fight or flight, because trying to stay awake involves all the adrenaline being pumped. Your adrenals are just going overtime. And what that does is eventually they become exhausted from overworking, and then they just keep pumping adrenaline for any old reason. You don't even need a situation to cause stress. You could just be sitting there, and for some out of the blue, you just feel shaky and the heart goes, or I developed heart arrhythmias, an ectopic beat in my left ventricle. I had Hashimoto's hypothyroidism. The whole nervous system started to implode and become shaky and unstable. And it was stress that did it. All the other lifestyle factors were there. I didn't eat processed foods. I did all the good things. But it was the stress. Stress is the #1 killer because of these chemicals that the body releases. And if you are exposed, they release free radicals in the body. They just consume you. So I had a big breakdown, which was a kind of a blessing in disguise. They rushed me to hospital one day, to the Southport Hospital, thinking I was having a heart attack because I couldn't breathe. I had the tightening of the chest, you know, all the symptoms. But in all the testing they did at the hospital, the cardiologist said, well, you don't have any blockages in your arteries. He said, so it's not that. Your heart muscle is functioning fine. It's formed the right way. That's not it. He said, you've just got a glitch in the nervous system because the heart muscle in the left ventricle had an involuntary muscle spasm, just like a twitch in the eye or a cramp in the leg, but it happened to be in the heart muscle, which is one of the worst muscles to have that happen because that's where you're pumping the blood. So the chamber would only half fill up before the extra beat kicked in, and then it would have to start all over again. So I was trying to catch my breath all the time. I was getting dizzy. It was really debilitating. I really thought I was going to die. I had an overwhelming sense if I didn't do something different that I would die. I knew it. I knew it. So sometimes the universe or God or, you know, slaps you around the face a little bit to give you a reality check, to wake you up out of your stupor, to take some action to make changes. And that's why you're all here today, because you want to know the truth, because you want to know what kind of actions to take to make those changes. And that's a really healthy attitude, because that means you're taking responsibility. You know, they did research years ago, psychologists did research with cancer patients, and they found the uniform common denominator with all people with cancer is they had a feeling they got out of control, they couldn't control something, they got angry about it, and they bottled up the anger because they couldn't change something. Someone did something, it was always outside of their own control, and they couldn't let go of that, they couldn't accept it. And so, you know, it started to eat away inside of them. So, so it's very important to have the right frame of mind. I used my research skills to investigate why I had those symptoms, because the hospital couldn't give me drugs. He said, if your blood pressure's too low, if we give you drugs, you'll have a heart attack if the heart is slowed. He said, there's no operation, there's no drugs, we can't help you. He said, and this is the clincher, he said, you would be surprised how many people have this problem out there. He said, Get used to it. Put up with it. Yes, put up with it. And I sat there, and to me that was like a red rag to a bull. I thought, right. I went straight back to my computer and started Googling all of the symptoms. And what popped up was a range of books and scientific articles about magnesium. All roads lead to Rome. Hey, what's this magnesium about? So I learned that magnesium was a muscle relaxant. And I had a problem in my heart muscle, so that made a lot of sense. I ordered all the books in, I read and devoured the information. I wanted to know the truth. I wanted to understand what was going on so I could take the right actions to fix my problem. In doing that, I learnt some truth that I want to share with you, because when you get to the truth, and the truth always works, it's totally predictable. When you understand something, the outcome is always the same because it's true. So then you become passionate about it, and you have to tell everyone. It's like you become possessed. So I'm possessed, I warn you. And that was my journey. I was also writing an article about fluoridation at the time, and the synchronicity was quite amazing because fluoride and magnesium are antagonists. They're the good guy and the bad guy, the white hat and the black hat, and they actually bind to one another. Magnesium sacrifices itself to bind with the fluoride so that you can excrete it. And fluoride will rob you of magnesium, so if it's low, it will rob you of the little bit of magnesium you do have. So all the symptoms of fluorosis or fluoride toxicity are exactly the same as magnesium deficiency. Wow. It fits. Everything fits. When you come across the truth, it always fits. So I used myself as a guinea pig, and I found the right way to do it using magnesium chloride salts, and the rest is history. I let the magazine go. I moved into supplying magnesium to people in Australia because it wasn't available at the time that I had my issues. And it was the best thing we've ever done, and it gives us great joy and pleasure to do what we do because of the feedback we get from people, and it's just an awesome experience. And other people feel the same. When they have something in their lives that works, they tell everyone, their friends, their family, and so that's why I'm here sharing with you today. And we will get down to the nitty-gritty of the science of everything now. So excuse me while I use my PowerPoint. Oh. Can you hear me? Is this working? No? Well, I'll try and shout. Oh gosh, stagnant water. Who knows that's bad? Yeah. Well, you know if you, oh there we go, haha, technology. You know if you don't look after your body, your bloodstream, the river that washes through you and all your cells starts to look a bit like that. And what we're going to learn about is how nature works, because we're part of nature. So if you learn to obey the rules of nature, nature will support you. Nature will support you and your energetic life force. The electricity that flows through your body is dependent upon you following the rules of nature. Have you heard the expression, nature is a bitch? Because if you don't, you get slapped around. Things don't work. Oh, okay. Is that the right level? Further away? Okay. In this situation, you've got stagnant water which is not moving. It's low in oxygen. It has high acidity or low pH. Usually many heavy metals and chemicals. And invariably lots of arsenic and fluoride, because they're in a lot of our waste, industrial waste products. Since man has been digging deep into the Earth's crust and pulling up uranium, phosphate rock. Fluoride is always embedded in part of that rock strata. It becomes a chemical waste when they process fertilizer or aluminium or make metals. And that chimney waste contains radon, lead, cadmium, arsenic, aluminium, lots and lots of chemicals not good to support life. They work against us. If you were living in a natural environment without those really dangerous chemicals and heavy metals from deep in the Earth's crust, you would just be exposed to what's in surface waters, which is usually a natural form of calcium called calcium fluoride. It's not very bioavailable because it's not very soluble, so if you do get traces, it's in and out of the body. It really doesn't stay very long if you have a healthy body. You don't need fluoride, the body kicks it out if things are going well. But in this case, we want to have a look at what you should be like inside your body. Your bloodstream should be like a free-flowing river or waterfall, because this kind of water is high in alkalinity, high oxygen. It's clean. It has the good microbes in keeping the bad guys under control, and it has lots and lots of oxygen, because we need oxygen to live, if you haven't noticed already. We need lots of oxygen because we use oxygen to burn the sugars to make energy. That's how we live as a physical body. And when the rivers in your body are clean and full of oxygen and pushing things through, you can be well and healthy, because you're a bunch of tubes. You don't want them to get blocked. When they get blocked, you get pain and things don't work the way they should. There's really no difference in the pathology or the reasons that you get degenerative diseases. It might be cancer or arteriosclerosis, diabetes, immune system disorders. The reasons really come down to pollution. This seminar should have been called Cancer, Heart Disease, Diabetes, Immune System Disorders, yada yada, and everything else, because that's what it's really all about. Now, in nature, we have many beautiful life forms, and when they're in balance, they're healthy and they live to their maximum genetic capacity. We are like a fish tank inside our bodies, about 80% water, and if you let the water get polluted and you don't put the right nutrients in, the fish get diseases and die early. And it's the same with our cells. Our cells are tiny little fish tanks, and all the little mitochondria and organelles in there are like the fish. They need the right balance of nutrients and trace elements, oxygen, water flow. Hydration is extremely important, and everything has to be in equilibrium and balance, and then it's flowing. Then your life force, the Asian cultures call it the chi energy. It's electrical. We are electricity. We're bioelectrical systems. So here you have a little diagram which shows stress, and well, toxins really do just exert another stress on the body. There are many kinds of stress. Toxic stress is a big one these days. Stress uses up magnesium because when you're in a fight or flight, the tissue cells release the magnesium into the bloodstream to counteract the effects of the stress hormones, the stress chemicals, such as cortisol and adrenaline. The adrenaline response is there to pull the calcium into the muscles, because calcium tightens the muscles and we have to be ready for action and tight and tense, and that's good. That can save our lives sometimes when a lion is chasing you. But then you have to relax, so magnesium comes in because it's the relaxation mineral. Magnesium is a relaxant. So what happens is we use up a lot of magnesium in the process of stress, any kind of stress, which leads to a low oxygen and acidic environment, because magnesium is fundamental in the detox process. So if we've used up magnesium to deal with the stress, we may not have enough to deal with process of elimination of waste products. those two conditions in the blood and in the cells will lead to disease and early aging and many manifestations. As I said before, it might be for one person diabetes, another cancer. All roads lead to Rome. Now everything comes down to the blood. The blood are your rivers of life. Inside the blood vessels you have platelets and white blood cells, your immune cells, the leukocytes that gobble up all the bad things that shouldn't be there. Your red blood cells, and they need to flow. They flow in a plasma solution, and so your bloodstream is mostly made up of water and mineral ions. Minerals in an ionic form that is completely dissolved in that fluid, and that gives it a certain electrical charge. It's ionic charge, and if everything is in the right balance or working the right way, it should be slightly more alkaline. So about 7.36 to 7.46, so around the 7.4 pH range, and it's so crucial to have the pH of the blood in that range that if you're too much above or below, you could have a coma and die. It's very, very serious. But what happens with disease is invariably the blood can get too thick, it can get coagulated, it can get full of pathogens, viruses, bacteria, which cause an immune response. So you've got then more leukocytes blocking traffic, causing traffic jams, because they start to change the charge of the blood from slightly negative to positive, which causes them to be attracted and clump together. You want to have a negative charge, a negative polarity in those blood platelets to bounce off one another. When they repel, they bounce and they flow through the system really well. The blood is more fluid. It's called a zeta potential. When they develop a positive charge, they start to attract, and that reduces the surface area of those little platelets. So they can't absorb as much oxygen from the blood, and they can't absorb enough nutrients from the blood because there's less surface area. It also doesn't travel through and push out all the toxins like it should, because blood needs to be very fluid and moving and mobile. When it's fluid, it travels through the tubes in a kind of a spiral motion, and it's scooping all the time, scooping and pushing the debris and the waste products that shouldn't be there, helping the lymph and the whole waste elimination system to move those toxins out of the body. That's when things are going well. You have fast flowing rivers with lots of oxygen like the waterfall. That should be in your blood as well, carrying those colloids. Colloids are just platelets and the other items in your blood dissolved in a liquid in suspension, plus the ions and the minerals and the trace elements. What goes against us to keep that bloodstream, which provides oxygen and nutrients to every cell of your body, this is the core of good health, a healthy bloodstream. What works against us is dehydration. There are three main things that cause the blood to thicken and coagulate. There's dehydration, not drinking enough water, and a lot of people don't drink enough water these days. I agree, tap water tastes awful. Excuse me, tastes like shit. Because they put so many chemicals in. Chlorine kills, you've got to kill the bad bacteria, and chlorine will do that very efficiently. But it's not really good for us to drink it, because what it'll do is kill all the good bowel bacteria. And later today you'll hear about the importance of keeping a healthy bowel. We need our little microorganisms to help us digest the food, because then it affects the metabolism. So chlorine will work against your good bowel flora. But in the old days you could just boil water and the chlorine will evaporate off it. Now there are chemicals like fluoride, which you can't boil off. All that does is make it more concentrated in the water after boiling. And fluoride, remember, will bind your magnesium. It will rob your magnesium, which is what you need for the life force. And aluminium, they treat the water with aluminium. It's a flocculant, and Flocculation means that aluminium will grab onto dust particles and make the water clear so it's not cloudy, and the dust then clumps together and moves to the bottom of the reservoir. So they use aluminium to provide water clarity, so what comes through the tap looks nice and clean, but it actually has aluminium in it, aluminium and many other chemicals. And aluminium, because it does that in the water outside, it also does that to your internal water. And it will cause those colloids to clump together and drop to your arterial lining, to your endothelial lining, which causes an irritation. It means that you've got waste products and toxins, sometimes heavy metals, things that shouldn't be in the body, settling on the arterial lining, causing an irritation, aggravation. So what happens? The immune system says, "Whoa, we got a problem there. Send it to sector B," and all the leukocytes come in and start to do their job, and they can release some dangerous acidic chemicals because their job is to get rid of stuff that shouldn't be there. And we have like byproducts that are highly corrosive, free radicals that can cause a further problem. So that means the pH goes down. pH needs to be around the 7, just a little bit over 7, a little bit more alkaline than neutral. If the pH drops too low, the body is so keen to keep the pH of the blood in the right level, it will pull calcium out of your bones, because calcium is an alkaline mineral. And if you don't have enough magnesium in your system, plan B is to use the calcium that's in the bones. So people will invariably develop osteoporosis because they're losing the calcium in the bones, which is then settling in the soft tissue and joints and the arterial lining, because it's there to deal with the pH problem. And then you get calcium lesions. So you go to the hospital or the doctor and you get tests called a calcium score, which measures the level of calcium in your arterial lining. And depending on how much or how thick the calcium is that you have in the lining, that shows your propensity to get heart disease or a heart attack or a stroke. And what happens as the calcium settles on the arterial lining, the artery loses its flexibility. It can't stretch when the blood's pumping through and the heart's pumping the blood. The vessel should be very flexible, moving in and out with that blood flow. But the calcium's hard. It's like rock or concrete. So they've got these deposits in the artery which restricts the expansion of the vessel, and as the vessel tries to expand, little splits happen. They're called calcium lesions. And so, what's plan C? The body then sends a cholesterol bandage. Cholesterol's made of fats because it can mold around that breach in the system to stop you leaking. More cholesterol, because we're dealing with a crisis. The body's dealing with a crisis. In that moment, it has to have a plug. So what happens as the cholesterol builds up, the narrowing of the artery becomes worse and less blood can get through, the fluidity changes, and you get hypertension, high blood pressure, because the blood's trying to push and there's restriction everywhere. It's not flowing smoothly and the gaps the opening has closed. So I mentioned zeta potential before. That's the electrical force in the blood as it's moving through. The ionic charge of those platelets to bounce off one another is the zeta potential. As the negative charge increases, more material can be carried in suspension. As the charge decreases, the particles move closer together and the liquid is able to carry less material. There is a point where the ability to carry material in suspension is exceeded and particles begin to clump together with the heavy metals or more positively charged colloids dropping out of the liquid and coagulating. So there you have clotting where it shouldn't be clotting. And that leads to an immune system response, because your body's always trying to fix problems because it's always looking for equilibrium. It has a design. Everything is set in your DNA and genes, how you should operate, how the body can get to equilibrium. So if it's cold outside, to maintain your temperature balance, you shiver, because then you're creating more energy to keep that internal temperature stable. If it's hot outside, you sweat, because that's the way your body uses to cool you down, to try and maintain the internal equilibrium. And that's with everything in your body. It's always looking for equilibrium. It's always looking for plan A, plan B, plan C, whatever it takes to stay alive. Your body's goal is to stay alive with what it has. But if you're not giving it all the ingredients and the materials via your lifestyle, then it can run into trouble, because it can only do its job when it has all the environmental conditions right. So inflammation sets in, which is an indication your body's in stress. Inflammation always causes swelling, because when something's not right, when something's being corroded and used up and oxidized, the serotonin is released, you can have histamines released, a whole range of chemicals which are helping the immune system to get rid of whatever it is offending. But then the byproducts of that are oxygen-free radicals, and unless you have enough antioxidants, enough water flowing through your system, unless you're keeping your body clean, avoiding toxins, chemicals, unless you're following a very basic lifestyle protocol, you'll find it really difficult to maintain the integrity of the blood flow and what it needs to be in balance. Inflammation causes swelling, and swelling causes pain. So when you feel pain anywhere in the body, it's usually in response to some kind of inflammation. Skin, eczema, dermatitis, psoriasis, that's inflammation happening in the skin. Usually that's connected with the liver not coping with getting rid of some kind of chemicals or waste products, because the liver's overloaded, and so it moves out into the next organ of excretion, which is the skin. The skin then, that's its job to try and get rid of stuff that shouldn't be there, but that stuff is irritating, and it causes inflammation and inflammatory response and itching and dryness. So you can see that the same pathways are involved in many different health issues, and it affects many organs and systems in the body, but really all based on the same thing, at the cellular, at the blood and the cellular level. So we have, like, inside our cells little mitochondria, and our cells are kind of like a battery, and they rely very much on the right polarity to function, to create energy. And most of the time you see in the world today with degenerative disease, there's a problem with the energy system and metabolism. Metabolism drops when the mitochondria can't produce ATP, that's the energy of the cell. When things start to slow down because of pollution and become clogged and they don't have the nutrients to eliminate, we lose the ability to generate energy for the brain. So people can develop some kind of mental illnesses or mental problems because the neurons aren't processing, because things aren't flowing the way they should, and the energy isn't able to reach the brain cells to be used properly. The blood pH is so important that the body will sacrifice calcium from the bones to maintain the necessary blood. So when calcium actually settles in the soft tissue and joints, it can settle anywhere. Calcium can settle in the eyes as cataracts. It can form kidney stones, gallstones, little crystals in the joints, arthritis. So we become older and harder and crunchier as the calcium starts to settle in the soft tissue and joints. And the blood becomes thicker, so you get free-floating calcium in the blood, which causes then the charge to change to positive and become thrombotic. And the continual exposure to these acids eats into the cell wall membranes of the heart, arteries and veins. And then it's a perfect environment for candida to flourish. So many pathogens, bacteria, viruses, fungi, they are always looking for a food source. And when the pH drops below what it should be to sustain a good life energy, we become low in oxygen and we start to oxidize quickly. We start to ferment. So we're not really using the oxygen then to to burn the sugar and make energy, the sugar then that's ingested starts to ferment and form acid, and that acid then is a downward spiral. It starts to eat into every cell. And Candida loves the waste products. You get colonies of these bacteria and these organisms that are there to recycle us. And if we didn't have them, it would be like having a bunch of plastic that never got broken down and turned into new things and new life forms. So nature is the big recycling plant. Things, you know, get broken down and into their individual elements, and they go back into the environment and get used by new life. And that's the way it is. But what you don't want is to start having your body being broken down by the nature's recyclers while you're still in it. So you've got to make a decision. I'm going to do whatever it takes to keep my body working at an optimal level for optimal health and fitness, so it becomes an expression of the full life force. No pain, no disease, just a sense of freedom and joy and experiencing life to the fullest. And you can do that, and it's possible. You have to employ many disciplines, however, because the world we live in, the marketing, the media, the advertising, the rules, most things are working against giving you the truth the way you need to understand it to employ in your own lives. So you need to stand back and become your own judge and jury. Don't give your power away to someone else. Don't believe everything everyone says. Check it out yourself. The truth is always simple. And when you come across the truth, you know 100% without doubt that's right. It works in your life, it works in other people's life. There is no doubt. The truth is always simple. What we do as mankind is we always like to change things and change the molecules and make them synthetic, and in some way it's implied it's better than nature. But if you look at anything that's synthesized, there are always terrible side effects, because mankind can't understand the very large web of life that we live in and how everything is so totally integrated and connected. And so what I have found, and what many other people have found, is that it's the rules of nature you need to obey first, and avoid the aberrations. By the way, having mentioned that about Candida, cancer patients always have prolific Candida in every case. You can't get someone with cancer without having abnormally large Candida colonies in the body. There's a very strong association between the two. There's a lot of discussion and debate about what's the chicken and what's the egg. And what I found interesting is that there's some researchers that say that a lot of the progression of cancer is due to these invading pathogens like Candida coming in to gobble us up, because as the waste products and the acidity in the body increase, that it provides an ideal colonization platform for the Candida. They get to a certain level or size, because you've always got Candida somewhere in the body, but it's under control by all the good microorganisms that are helping you in your bowel and the immune system. But when the good guys can't survive very well because it's too acidic, the bad guys get to have a free run, and they form very large colonies, and particularly Candida, and it's a fungus. So when it reaches a certain size, it morphs, and it starts to send out tendrils, and the tendrils actually pierce your good cells and suck the nutrient out of them. So they're parasites feeding off your cells. And what they do is they're able to change the protein covering of those cells to disguise them from your immune system, so your immune system doesn't recognize there's something wrong. Normally, your immune system would kill them, and that's called apoptosis, cell death, and dispose of it, and then you'd build a new cell. So you have that process going on in the body all the time. Cells die and new ones get born. But what happens with the cancer cell is that it develops the corruption because it's being fed, it's become a food source, and the immune system isn't getting rid of it like it should. So what we want to address is cleansing the body, getting the pH balance right, so you don't provide the ideal environment for these pathogens, because they then come in and start to do their recycling job. Killing them isn't the answer. It's taking away their ideal environment that's the answer. See, in modern medicine, the idea is to kill, kill, kill. Cut it out, poison, burn, kill it. But it's still in the rest of the body. You're not actually dealing with the problem. You can't have that attitude. You may get over a really acute crisis with surgery, so there's a place for everything, and you need your painkillers to get through that surgery and whatever has to be done. But the fundamental way to beat degenerative disease, including cancer, is to address the lifestyle issues and to make sure the blood is flowing smoothly and the transport systems are working, the oxygen levels are high, the hydration is adequate. And you have enough magnesium. Now, magnesium is the fundamental trunk of your nutritional tree. It is the master mineral. So you've got to do all these lifestyle, get plenty of sunshine for your vitamin D3. Vitamin D3 must work with magnesium. If you take D3 without enough magnesium, it can become toxic. So you have to be careful, because it's a synergy. It's never one pill or one thing. It's a whole group of things working together. Water is essential, and clean mineralized water. So rainwater, via tank water or reverse osmosis, filtered ion exchange, filtered water, even supermarket bottled water, spring water, but try and avoid the fluoridated tap water, because that's a thing which will rob you of the magnesium, and you need the magnesium to live. 3 litres every 24 hours. Now, once you take all the chemicals out of water with filtering, you have to put minerals back, because demineralized water is acidic. And remember, the body likes slightly alkaline. So you've got to realkaline your water by putting the minerals and trace elements in, using the best is raw sea salt. But with magnesium chloride, the sodium's been removed, and we do get a lot of sodium. Even though we need sodium, the food supply does supply us with a lot of sodium, and often we can get too much sodium. So by having the magnesium chloride, we're getting all the sea trace minerals and packaged up with the magnesium, but not too much sodium. And that just makes a beautiful mineral water. You can use it to soak and bathe in. Eat fresh foods, avoid the processed carbohydrates. Again, processed carbohydrates don't deliver the nutrients we need, and the body treats it just like sugar, and sugar is a poison, and you're going to learn a bit more about sugar with another presentation today. Sugar turns into acid in the body, and we want to avoid over-acidifying. You need to choose foods rich in sulfur and selenium, because we're absorbing too many heavy metals, including mercury. Mercury is always associated with cancer. High levels of mercury in the body. You may have got it from mercury amalgam fillings or vaccinations, or sometimes it's in foods even. There are many sources of mercury. Fish, for instance, from the ocean. And funnily enough, the candida loves to feed off mercury. So if you've got high candida colonies, chances are you've also got high mercury levels. So detoxing is really important. You've got to go find the help of someone who has a lot of experience and expertise in detoxing, so that it doesn't happen too fast and you don't get too many symptoms, which can be unpleasant. Things have to be done gradually and in a comfortable way for it to be working well for you, because the whole time, it's about you, about having a good experience. And detoxing and health should be a pleasant experience. It should be something you want to do, you love to do. It should become normal and automatic. So magnesium-rich foods are in seaweed has the highest, because it comes from the ocean. Magnesium is the 3rd most abundant mineral in ocean water, and so seaweed has a lot of magnesium. And then after that, legumes like beans and lentils, nuts, seeds, organ meats, soup bones, which is why soup broth is so nutritious. You get lots of minerals coming out of the bone marrow into the soup broth, including gelatin, which is really good to deal with inflammation. It's one of the best things for digestion and inflammation, the gelatin from bones. So that's why when people are really sick or have the flu, they don't feel like eating, they can drink soup broth, vegetables and bones, and that will give them a really good mineral content without having any work to do in digestion. Because when you're sick, the digestive system doesn't work very well. It's a bit like being in the fight or flight stress mode. The energy is going from the digestive system into dealing with the problem in the fight or flight mode, or dealing with the immune system response, which requires a lot of energy to get rid of the pathogens or whatever issues you're dealing with. So you can't really rely on digestion very well when you're in that kind of inflammatory crisis stage. So soup is very good, and eat light vegetables, lots of green vegetables. Green vegetables are good because magnesium is at the center of the chlorophyll molecule. See, there's magnesium. That's the chlorophyll molecule. It's so important because plants use chlorophyll to convert sunlight into starches, and we eat the plants and we get the energy from the starches, but it's all converted by the chlorophyll in the plants, of which magnesium is the center. So it's integral in energy and delivering of electricity, of energy from the sun. Magnesium has 12 protons, 12 neutrons, 12 electrons. So it's a very high mathematical number. It's beautifully balanced mineral, and it cofactors with many other nutrients. It's very powerful. In fact, most other nutrients can't work very well. Certainly enzymes don't work well when magnesium is low. Magnesium will support enzyme activity, and enzymes are what your cells need to kick off all the various functions, be it digestion or thinking or whatever your body is doing. It has to have enzymes as a catalyst inside the cell, and those enzymes work much better because the magnesium ion delivers the electrolytes, the charge, or the spark plug, if you like, to kick off those processes. Simply, life cannot exist without magnesium. That's how fundamental it is. We evolved over, or our physical bodies evolved over millennia from ocean water, from ocean salt. In fact, years ago in the 60s, they did tests where they didn't have any blood plasma for a blood transfusion in a serious case that would have died had they not got a blood transfusion, and they used seawater diluted to 50%. It was very pure ocean water from far out with no pollutants in, just natural, diluted 50%. They used that as an infusion. A complete recovery happened within days without any side effects. And actually the results were much better had they received someone else's blood plasma, because the breakup or the proportion of the trace elements and minerals in the water of seawater is so similar to blood plasma. So plants, animals, fish, all natural organisms, all life forms within nature depend on magnesium. Like water, it's as important as water. So you need your electrolyte balance. Magnesium is the master mineral, and it governs the other electrolytes. So you have in the media, take lots of calcium for your bones, and yes, the calcium does make the bones hard, but as I said before, it leaches out of the bones when magnesium is low. What's inside the bones when the body is healthy has lots of calcium and magnesium. You need the two of them to pair. Magnesium joins with calcium and then moves it into the bones to make the bones stronger. So magnesium in that sense has like a detoxing effect. It cleans up the body of all those calcium deposits over time. No, nothing overnight. It happens in increments, and then helps rebuild the bones to make the bones stronger. And you can't absorb enough zinc without magnesium. You can't use the iron in your body without magnesium to make energy. I had anemia 4 years ago, and the blood test showed normal levels of iron. But why was I anemic? Because magnesium was so critically low. I had chronic magnesium deficiency for way too long, and the whole energy system just starts to implode. Now, Ca, calcium, and potassium and sodium, and magnesium, the four main mineral electrolytes that maintain the integrity of the cell, and the cell membrane. So that's the outside circle. I won't call it a skin because new researchers are finding it doesn't really have a skin, it's just the edge of the cell. Kind of like our skin. Our skin's not really a piece of plastic that's disconnected from us, it's just the edge of the body. But for a good healthy cell, you need lots of potassium, that's the Ks, inside the cell, and lots of magnesium. Outside the cell, you need lots of sodium and calcium. And the calcium and the sodium really want to get inside the cell. When the integrity of the cell is good, that's the electrical charge of it, it forms a structured water inside a cytoplasm which keeps the sodium out because sodium molecules are large. But when the cell loses its charge, it starts to go the other way because of loss of magnesium. Now you need magnesium to maintain the electrical charge. When you lose the magnesium and too much of it, the charge is weaker. The membrane loses its integrity, and what happens is too much sodium and calcium floods inside, and then you lose the potassium, follows the magnesium out of the cell. Once you lose too much potassium to extracellular, you can have a heart attack. It causes spasms. So you see, the integral nature of magnesium and everything, we need everything working together to maintain the balance. So lack of magnesium can cause cramps, restlessness. Calcemia is just too much calcium in the soft tissue and joints, which then leads to inflammation and pain and an immune system response. You can't produce as much energy in the cells, so you can get chronic fatigue and all sorts of other energetic metabolic problems happening. Hormones, enzymes, thyroid are directly impacted by lack of magnesium. Pregnancy and fertility, obviously if the body's stressed, it's difficult to go through a normal pregnancy. You can have birth complications. What you need is magnesium to relax everything. You want the baby to have a relaxing experience, and you want to bounce back and have the flexibility that magnesium provides. And also pregnancy will require a lot of mineralization, and if the mother's not consuming enough foods or absorbing enough magnesium, the nature will take those minerals out of the mother's bones and give it to the baby that's developing. So in the last trimester of pregnancy, it's often common to develop loose teeth and problems with the teeth, sore lower back, things happen with the bones, but not if you supply lots of magnesium. Collagen, insulin and blood sugar and heart rhythm. Well, I mentioned heart rhythm because I had my own problems with the heart rhythm. It's calmed and put back into rhythm with lots of magnesium, because magnesium is there to support the whole nervous system and the electrical system that moves around the body. And the blood pressure, we talked about that. Now insulin's very interesting. You need a sufficient magnesium for the pancreas to produce insulin, and then without enough magnesium, the cell gateways stay closed. In other words, they don't let, when you eat and you have higher levels of sugars and insulin in the blood, they should be going into the cell for the ATP energy to be produced by the mitochondria. But if the cell doesn't have access of that insulin and blood sugar, if the cell gateways stay closed, then the energy systems will decrease. And so you can get diabetes, type 2, so it's difficult to metabolize and to create energy, yet you have plenty of sugars and insulin being produced, and it's in the blood, it's able to be measured. So every time people increase their magnesium, they find the sugar cravings go away, the metabolism increases, particularly magnesium chloride, because the body needs lots of chloride, especially for digestion. Collagen formation. Magnesium is essential for collagen formation. So every time someone is very deficient in magnesium, you'll find their skin, hair, nails, bones, teeth, everything sort of becomes weaker. It's not as strong, becomes more sensitive. That's because, remember the cell membranes, the membrane loses its integrity. And so you can get chemicals that you're exposed to, you become more sensitive, you become more allergic. Stuff gets into the inner system, breaches our defense systems. normally it would be kept out, but it gets in. It can get in through the bowel wall, the blood-brain barrier. You can get toxins breaching the inner sanctum of the brain that should never be there, because the membranes have lost their integrity, because magnesium got too low and the collagen structures are weakening. After a few months of magnesium, you'll find it harder to cut your toenails. And of course the brain benefits, because magnesium is a calming mineral and it relaxes muscles. It helps the blood flow more smoothly. You get more oxygen in the brain from a better blood flow and a better zeta potential. It's like a whole systemic tonic. Magnesium is just like water, and hydration and magnesium are the fundamental constituents of your blood, and that's what you need first and foremost to keep in equilibrium. And it supports immunity. They found magnesium increases the virility of leukocytes, that's your white blood cells, to get rid of pathogens. So they do a much better job at getting rid of what shouldn't be in your body. Low magnesium accelerates aging. And low magnesium is associated with excessive production of oxygen-derived free radicals and low-grade inflammation, oxidative stress, and any age-related diseases. In other words, as the older we get, the lower in magnesium we get, the higher in calcium we get. It's like a seesaw, and we just get old and hard and crunchy over time, because that's aging, isn't it? Well, do you want to stave off aging? Do you want to slow it down? Have lots of magnesium. Babies come into the world with heaps of magnesium. That's why they're so spongy and juicy and bouncy and flexible. And you could just eat them up because they got lots of water and magnesium. The older we get, the more dehydrated we get, the less magnesium we get, the old and hard and crunchy and closer to death we get, because we're losing the life force. We're losing the rivers and the ionic minerals that we need to conduct the electricity, which is our life force. Magnesium is triggers the cells to release toxins. Make sure you drink enough water. You have to have those rivers flowing through you to get rid of the excess waste products, to help drive the negative charge in the blood, clean up the calcium, promote flexibility in the arterial walls, give you that bounce and get up and go. And you know, it's pretty hard to feel joy if you're feeling in pain and stuck and inflamed, and you know, really, joy is there because your vehicle, your physical vehicle, is working really well. It's a bit of chicken and egg, I guess. They both need to work together, good attitude and great lifestyle. Oh, what causes magnesium deficiency? Stress. I spoke before about whenever you have stress, you lose magnesium. The more stress you have, the more deficient you become, unless you put enough back. It's a bank account. So you don't want to become magnesium deficient, because that's really robbing you of the life you could have well and healthy. It's nice, like Dennis said one day, to just, you've had enough and you fall asleep and you die peacefully, and there's no pain, no drama, no trauma. It's all good. It's all meant to be that way. And you've lived your life to the fullest. You look back and you say, that was good. That's what I want to do. So you've got to have some disciplines. Avoid excessive alcohol, caffeine, sugar, diuretics, because diuretics will cause you to lose massive amounts of magnesium. Birth control pill, estrogen. Estrogen really consumes a lot. It creates a lot of imbalance in the body, and many foods these days are estrogenic. Plastic-derived substances create, and soy products that aren't fermented create an estrogenic response, and so we can get overloaded with estrogen, which then creates inflammatory response and a downward spiral. Excessive exercise. Athletes are some of the most deficient in magnesium because they're always pushing their body hard. They sweat out all their electrolytes, and often they don't put them back. And those protein bodybuilding powders usually don't have enough magnesium anywhere near. And those liquid protein drinks that they have actually cause the body to use up more magnesium. So if it's not being put back in that bank account, they can end up with a deficit. And if you have an athlete that burns out quickly or has a heart attack in the middle of a marathon run, it's because they've become critically low in magnesium. Some people have, 10% of the population they found have a gene that causes excessive magnesium loss. So there's various reasons you can lose magnesium. Exposure to chemicals, fluoride, heavy metals, the soils in Australia are the most magnesium deficient in the world. So even if you eat fresh or healthy organic foods, chances are you're still not getting enough magnesium to compensate for all the stress that we're under these days. And you know, it's stress from EMF, you know, we're in front of the computer too long, we're in these electrical environments. That's a background stress you can't see, but it's still there. The news, avoid watching the news 10 times over because it's always the same bad news anyway. Air pollution, radiation exposures, you know, if you do a lot of flying and you're walking through all those scanners and then you have a scan of your teeth and your bones at the chiropractor and it all adds up, you'd be amazed. And malabsorption is caused by, so you can't absorb enough magnesium if you've had traumas like burns, hospital operations, serious injuries, liver dysfunction, diabetes. It starts to just close everything down. Because we're running out of time, I'll just go through this quickly. There have been quite a number of magnesium and cancer studies, and in every case of cancer they found magnesium is extremely chronically low. In addition, these studies have found that radiation therapy and chemotherapy, both of those therapies severely deplete magnesium, and the same research actually was University of Athens 2002 found that low magnesium itself is carcinogenic. Did you get that? Low magnesium itself is carcinogenic. So here they are treating people with cancer with something that causes cancer. And so it was printed in an oncology journal for oncologists, and the scientists that performed the study recommended in their conclusion that people be supplemented with magnesium whilst they're undergoing these therapies to compensate for what's lost. But I have yet to find an oncologist actually familiar with that study. Low magnesium means the DNA can't repair the broken links, and DNA gets cleavage or splits in it, and without magnesium it's not repaired, and so then you can get aberrant cells, you can get dysfunctional corrupted cells that way as well. The studies have found that the lower the magnesium, the worse the problem. So it is quantity dependent. Now the best form of magnesium, because there are many different forms, and bear in mind when you're sick or the older you get, the less stomach acid you make, the harder it is to digest tablets and powders. And magnesium is particularly hard to get through the bowel wall. So most of the time people can only get maybe 20% of the actual elemental magnesium, making it through to the tissue cells where it's used, to the muscle and bone. 99% of your magnesium is in the muscle and bone, and 1% is in the blood, because the blood is the transport system. It's going in and it's going out. The tissue cells is where magnesium is used for that expansion and contraction and that electrical conductivity. So the best form of magnesium is natural raw sea salt, you'll find that sodium is a very big part of raw sea salt, and by all means use raw sea salt for your cooking and condiments and to flavour your food. You should never use pure sodium chloride without all the sea trace minerals going with it as a package, because that's very dehydrating, and that's the kind of salt that pushes blood pressure up. It's actually causing an inflammatory response in the system, but not when you have it in its natural form packaged with all the other sea trace minerals, which provide really good buffering. It's a softer taste, the food tastes much better. Having said that, that's still quite in proportion, a lot of sodium in relation to the magnesium and other trace minerals. So by skimming off the sodium chloride, which rises to the top in evaporation, we're left with magnesium chloride and all those little trace elements in the bottom corner there. You know, the boron, iron, calcium, strontium, silica, all the trace elements that you need working together as well. They do also very important jobs. Through the skin, it's very easy to absorb, and we've been doing it for thousands of years via the process of balneotherapy, which is the practice of bathing in hot or cold water enriched with minerals for healing. This hydrotherapy is often combined with massage. It is a popular practice in Europe and Japan. Balneotherapy is derived from the Latin word bath, balneum. And you may have done it yourself. They have hot mineral springs in New Zealand, in Europe, through Poland and all the Baltic states. I know my heritage is Austrian, and my family that's still over there regularly go and have a couple of weeks bathing every day in these rich mineral springs for a rejuvenation effect. They get rid of arthritis and pain and swelling and just feel much more well afterwards. So there's nothing new under the sun. So just to recap, it's difficult to digest tablets and powders, and you can't get enough magnesium through. But through the skin, the body takes what it needs and no more. When it's had enough, it switches off. So you can't overdose via the skin. And Dr. Norman Shealy proved in a study that magnesium chloride, when applied transdermally, increases DHEA production. This effect is not seen in oral or intravenous administration. It is thought that transdermal absorption of magnesium interacts with the fatty tissues of the skin to create the effect. Studies link low levels of DHEA to chronic inflammation, immune dysfunction, depression, rheumatoid arthritis, type 2 diabetes complications, and a greater risk of cancers, heart disease, and osteoporosis. So DHEA is your master hormone, and all of the other hormone in the cascade are made from that. The transdermal route is very powerful. It means we don't have to digest anything. The body takes up what it needs like a smorgasbord. So you're just putting on your skin a dinner plate. You're just offering the nutrients, and the body chooses what it needs. When it reaches equilibrium for those nutrients, it stops absorbing. So probably about half an hour, and then it starts to wane and drop off. Half an hour is all you need, but make sure you do some kind of magnesium exposure daily, because it's like water. You can't drink on Monday and none for the rest of the week. Your body's always using it up. So what happens is if you have the right amount of oils and fats with the magnesium, it's pulled into the epidermis, which is the outer layer of the skin where it sits. From underneath you have the dermis, and tiny capillaries in the dermis absorb the magnesium and nutrients through the skin into the bloodstream that way. And the body's always in control. Even people with kidney dysfunction can very easily and safely use transdermal absorption, because there's never an excess for the kidneys to get rid of, because the excess isn't taken up. Make sure you drink lots of water. You need to have those rivers flowing through you for proper elimination, and as magnesium builds in the cellular tissue and the reserves build up, the charge increases. You're going to need the hydration. You're going to need that wash through of water with plenty of oxygen to clean up the cells. Magnesium chloride is very hygroscopic, so as opposed to magnesium sulfate, which is Epsom salts actually has a drying effect, and it can be skin irritating to some people, and it doesn't stay in the body very long. So it's good if there's no other magnesium available. It can save you from a crisis, but comparing the two forms of magnesium chloride with all those sea trace minerals is a much more bioavailable form of magnesium, easily taken up and retained in the cells to use for all the processes. 2 minutes to go. Okay, faster. There are just more studies to show that balneotherapy, magnesium absorption from mineral water, is very successful through the skin. Magnesium from mineral waters can easily be absorbed, and its absorption rate is similar to that from pharmaceutical magnesium preparations. Combined balneotherapy remodels abnormal lipid component of cellular membranes. This allows using this method in the primary prevention of arteriosclerosis in persons with risk factors in the absence of changes in serum lipid spectrum. I just collected a bunch of studies. We know it's true. It works. This is one of the effects of having an inflammatory response on the skin. This lady had a really bad case of psoriasis a few years ago, and she started, she did an experiment and she put magnesium cream on just one arm and one leg, and she found she had an all-over alleviation of her psoriasis over a number of months. So it shows that the body's absorbing no matter where you put it on the body. It's going inside and working from the inside out. And that's where we want to finish up with wellness and balance. Thank you very much for listening.
fantastic. Thank you.
How can you stop someone who has so much knowledge? Listen to it. It's just fantastic. It's very difficult. Did anybody enjoy it? I think she was great. Absolutely drives you, gives you so much knowledge. We're going to have about 5 minutes break for tea or coffee if you would like to prefer, and also we have a bit of snacks, some fruit and carrot and all the healthy stuff. If you would like to go to the toilet or have a coffee or tea, please do so. Thank you. He's got a lot of information to share with you, and I believe you will enjoy his speech. So please welcome Bruce Bell. Thank you.
Thank you. I do have a lot I can say. I'll try and get through as much of it as I can. If I'm a bit irreverent about doctors and a few other people, please forgive me, but there's good reason for it. And you'll learn why as we go. Now, one of the statistics that most people probably don't know is how bad a problem cancer is. On official statistics, in 1970, 1% of Australians had an expectation of getting cancer. Guess how much it is now?
100%. 60.
Half. 50% and growing fast. Yeah. Now that relates to a few things that I will cover, and I'll move quickly so that I hopefully get through the material that I can get through. You need to understand something that came out of a conversation I had a few years ago with the wife of a local doctor. He did his degree at University of Queensland, and we were talking about nutrition. And she said, "Do you know how much training my husband got in nutrition at University of Queensland? 3 lectures, 6 hours. That's it. You'd learn more reading a magazine." Hospital dietitians know practically nothing about good nutrition. They know the theory. Most of you probably don't know that the 5 food group pyramid that we use in this country, and I'm not sure where else, but in parts of Europe they basically reversed it and reconfigured it because it's just plain wrong. What the truth is very different because, again, not many people perhaps know, that diagram that we all had shoved in front of our faces as children in school probably is altogether out of proportion because it was dreamed up about 100 years ago or 80 years ago by a fellow who was a PR man for the Grains Council. They wanted to sell carbohydrates. Now, carbohydrates in our genetic history are fairly recent, since we stopped being hunter-gatherers and started farming. We have this massive increase in cancer for a couple of reasons in particular that the previous speaker mentioned. 1971%, now 50% cancer patients we are. And the reason particularly is that our diet's changed radically and our nutritional content has dropped radically. There are 2 minerals that were mentioned earlier, selenium and forget what else, that relate to particularly to cancer. Or of course magnesium is what we're talking about, is the other one that is very, very short in Australian food. Shortage of selenium is a major cause of cancer or recurrence of cancer. And the CSIRO about, I think 5 years ago, did some research on foods out of supermarkets or shops in Adelaide, properly done research. Guess how much selenium was in the food? 0. That's Australian soils, the most depleted on the planet. Now those deficiencies can be made up, but one thing I should mention is a little bit of background, because who am I? Why do I know what I'm talking about? Do I know what I'm talking about? I'll relate where I came from this way. When I was 6, in grade 1 at school, the headmaster said to me one day, "I'll give you a lift home," saved me a 2-kilometre walk. So I went home and I was curious. He said he wanted to talk to my parents, and my mother happened to come out. My family were poultry farming at the time. We had thousands of chooks. She, however, had spent a lot of time learning about nutrition, and we were far more successful at poultry farming than others, and consequently made more money. Our chooks laid more eggs. she happened to come out and I was curious, so I hung about like a typical 6-year-old, and the headmaster said, the kids at school waste half the food that they come with their lunches, you know, throw half in the bin. He said, it's such a waste, could you use it for your chooks? Well, my mother was very well mannered, but this was such a shock that she forgot to be well mannered and just blurted out, oh no, she said, only people are stupid enough to eat all that white sugar and carbohydrate. So that's where I came from, and I've learned a bit since. In the last few years, I was on the founding board of a cancer charity here locally that the authorities ended up putting out of business because one of the directors wouldn't take good advice, and I'm now able to give a bit of legal advice. I got a degree a few years ago. If you think there's free speech in this country, I would challenge that, because there's a lot of things you're not allowed to say. You're not allowed to say, for example, that something fixes cancer. Now, a bit later in what I have to say, I will show you 2 things that do. Absolutely. But I'll ask you a question rather than make a statement, because I'm not allowed to make a statement. So if you hear me asking a question, pay close attention. The problem I perceive with doctors at large is arrogance, and of course they're plain busy. The guy who did 3 lectures in medical school just never ever has time nowadays to do any study. The Australian doctor nearly 25 years ago who discovered the cure for stomach ulcers got a Nobel Prize only in the last 5 years, I think, because after 20 years a bit of news had soaked into the medical mind collectively around the planet, but only with some of them. It was only 1% in America that knew about it 20 years after he found the cure. I don't know how many of you know, but the AMA, which, whether it be Australian or American Medical Association, referred to as the AMA, about 1910 through to 1920 were hijacked by drug companies, literally, and they don't teach anything about nutrition or anything much except drugs now. I have a client who's a social worker in the hospital system, and he tells me that in the last 15 years since he's been doing that work, the medical training has deteriorated majorly, that they learn a lot less as doctors than they did before. On the other hand, vets are pretty darn good, because their patients don't speak to them and they have to solve problems without hearing from the patient. Now, one of the best around is a fellow called Joel Wallach, and I'd recommend his books. This is one. It's called Rare Earths, Forbidden Cures. Wallach's quite outstanding. He'd be in his 70s now. He's been to Australia a couple of times. But in his early days, he was a vet in the Midwest of the US. And by fluke, he got a job to help a zoo, a major zoo over there, not only keep their animals healthy, but keep them healthy enough to be reproducing. And he had not 5 or 6 varieties of animals, small animal practice or large animal practice. He had 100, I suppose, different species. And he got to be very successful at it, and he ended up a consultant to 3 other zoos. But this got him thinking, because he realised that people don't get that level of expertise from doctors. Animals get it from vets, because there's money in keeping vets keeping animals healthy. There's more money in people being sick for drug companies. And they can sue me if they like, that's just the truth. To give you a bit of a clue about how easy it is to save a lot of money in the medical sphere, I'll share a little bit of a personal story. About nearly 2 years ago, I had a minor heart problem. So I go to the hospital, get ambulance down to Brisbane, shoved in the right ward there, and it was fairly minor. I had whatever the usual parameters are. It's 100 if it's really bad. I had 12. But there's another measure, and they put a stent into my heart, which was quite interesting. I was chatting to the guy while we did it through a blood vessel from the wrist. Very much better than the old ways. But afterwards, they wanted to fill me up with about 8 different drugs. And by the time I sort of realised I was dopey because of the drugs, I could think straight enough to say no. So I went away and did 2 hours internet research and got the answer. They, meanwhile, are spending $40 billion projected on finding a cure for heart disease. or a cure for this, or a cure for that. And we've all been hearing about cures, but not a lot of them materialise. To give you an indication, I have the pathology to say that at the time I had the problem, I had 25 units of the trouble. Normal parameters are between 0 and 7. Within a few months of getting onto a nutritional regime to replacing the missing sulphur and several other things in my diet, I didn't have 25 units anymore, I had 7, and then a bit later I had 5. So I'm well within normal healthy parameters, and if the doctors had had their way, I'd have been walking around like a zombie, feeling crook and unable to do anything. But really what really tipped the scales is it wrecks your sex life if you stay on their rubbish. So I wasn't going to have that. When I saw the specialist for a checkup months later, the guy that did the surgery, was a very nice young bloke of about 40. And I was his last patient for the day, and we had a chat. He said, what medications are you on? I said, none. Well, we chatted through the process, so he knew I wasn't an idiot. So he asked me what I was on. So I told him. Just took it in. And when we were out of earshot of the ward, because he walked out with me, then he spoke the truth. He grabbed me by the shoulders and said very earnestly and quietly, keep doing what you're doing. It's the best thing. Now, that is true of many things. I don't know if you know, but Otto Warburg, a doctor who at that time was head of the Max Planck Institute in Germany, one of the most respected scientific institutions in the world, got in 1931 a Nobel Prize for medicine for his work with cancer. He was the one who discovered the real basis of cancer, which is that it metabolises sugars, not oxygen like healthy cells. So there's a number of factors that precipitate it, there's a number of factors that can prevent its return, but the actual process is that it's metabolising not oxygen, right? Oxygen will kill it. So it's something we haven't tested, but it may be that if you popped yourself into a hyperbaric chamber like the Navy have and super oxygenated yourself, you might knock off all the cancer that might be in your body that way. But there's lots of better ways of doing it. Now, if you go to a health food shop and want to get the kind of supplements that you might have done a bit of research and figure that you need, I'd suggest you'd need $1,000 in cash and a wheelbarrow. What many people again don't know, and there's friends of mine in the alternative industry who do, is that in the last couple of years, the drug companies have gobbled up at a fast rate the alternative companies, the people that make vitamins and supplements, gobbled them up at a rate of knots. Now they're going to stay even more profitable. It's just an arm to their operations. But they're not going to deliver enough quantity, and it's going to be expensive, perhaps more so than in the past. Just to give you an order of magnitude, again, I don't suppose they teach this in school, but if you know what the Fortune 500 companies are in the US, it's the top earning 500 companies, the biggest. In those 500, 8 out of the biggest 10 are drug companies. And if you aggregate their earnings, it equals the earnings of the other 492. That's how big it is. And how, I think it's a free country, we're supposed to have free speech. How evil they are is driven by the commercial aspects, mega bucks. But remember, they're dealing with doctors who get told what the drug companies want them to hear. I've got something to show you a bit later of some photos of one of my sons. Now, this particular one got a job with one of the drug companies as a rep some years ago. He lasted a year and his conscience got him out. But he was one of 12 for one of the 4 big companies, and he had a 1/12 of the product range that they had just for cardiologists that he was selling. So he would go and see a cardiologist whenever, take them out to the theatre, do all sorts of things to coerce them to listen to the story. But then there were 11 from the same company coming in to tell him about the rest of the product range. And that's just heart problems. So, you know, if you operate with integrity, you might do as he did and quit. Now, going on to nutrition, the Australian soils, as I mentioned, are very depleted, mainly because they're very old. And I had to learn what was available to fix that problem before I understood in a flash of inspiration why it was. All of the goodies in our soil have been washed out over millennia. And they're in the ocean, aren't they? They're in the ocean. They're not in our soils. So all these theoretical food values, you know, we're eating veggies there at morning tea break. We don't know what's in there. A tomato today might have a fraction of what was in it in 1930 when they might have assessed it, growing in soils that weren't depleted. So we don't know what's in our soils. If the government was honest, they'd get some research dollars applied and find out what's in the food produced on monocrop soils today, and of course sent to the supermarkets before it's ripe, before it's got the real nutrition in it. But it'll be vastly different. Now, if you want to do something that doesn't cost $1,000, but it might take you a wheelbarrow to bring home, I can give you one good tip. And this comes out of research that came out of the Can Help organisation, which we set up, as I mentioned, as a charity handling cancer reasonably successfully, although I know a lot more now than we knew then, because when it was closed down by the authorities for daring to say it could do something useful, I had to do some research. It wasn't my end of things. I was looking after the legal and financial end of it. But I did some research because we had several cancer patients who specially asked me, what can I do? Can you continue to help me? And I found 43, I think, 40-something nutrients that are all essential, or said to be essential, for preventing a recurrence of cancer. But as the previous speaker said, the first thing is to get the bloody carbohydrates, the simple carbohydrates, out of your diet as far as you possibly can. And I do believe, on some evidence, that what Dr. DiMatteo wrote years ago in a book about blood types, that people vary, and if you're an O blood type, the most common, you probably need carbohydrates less than the others, certainly simple carbohydrates, because, as was said, they convert in minutes to sugar in the body. So sugar consumption, by the way, it came after Christopher Columbus 500 years ago from Latin America. I presume they had beet sugar around Europe prior to that, but it was the drug of choice in the courts of some of the royal families in England, because they used to get high on sugar. They'd have a little bit, the body wasn't used to it, couldn't cope with it, and they'd treat it like we do cocaine today. I leave myself out of that, by the way. But they would treat it that way, and in today's dollars it was worth $16,000 a pound, that is less than half a kilo. $16,000 today, it was what the price was. So of course everybody aspired to do what the wealthy did and have the stuff. In 1900, in America, the average consumption of sugar per person was 10 pounds. That's about 4 kilos. Any guesses what it is at last count? 170 last I heard. Yeah, 170, and your body can't cope with it. Add to that the depleted minerals. I mean, you can go to a company, and I'm not here to promote companies, but there's 2 or 3 products I will talk about because they're just darn good value and extremely useful. There's a company called Pacific Salt in Brisbane. I've got my sea minerals from them. Now, we're talking earlier about what's in the sea being good for you. Have any of you seen how they produce salt in Australia? I've seen 2 or 3 places. If the rest of you haven't, what typically happens is places on the west and the east coast, but typically in the warmer areas where they have more tropical areas where they have high tides. And they just have a very flat acreage, quite a big acreage, with a big levee bank round it about 2 metres high. And it's right beside the ocean. And when the high tide hits, they open it up and let it fill. Then they block it off as the tide recedes, or before the tide recedes. And they leave that water sit there for maybe, I'm not sure, maybe 6 weeks, and it evaporates, eventually down to what's left is salt, except it's not salt. If they want real salt, they do it differently. They stop when it gets to about 3% of the original volume, and they run out of the bottom the stuff the salt is floating on, which is mineral-rich water. And that mineral-rich water has been wasted, but man, do we need it. You can buy it down there. You can buy it in the health food shop and pay about $60 a litre. I buy it in 20-litre lots and pay $45 for 20 litres, so it's about $2.30 or something instead of $60 to get a litre. Take a teaspoonful a day, you are getting all of the 90 odd minerals that we need in exactly the same ratio as in healthy human blood, with one exception, two exceptions. Calcium and magnesium are underrepresented in there, so you might need to supplement those. But it's a wonderful way of getting massively good supplementation. What Joel Wallach, see, you can't put this book down, look. What he talks about, he analyses all of the minerals. He's talking about minerals, and there's a list of the diseases that a deficiency can cause. Now with cancer, selenium is in there, but there's about 20 other diseases that come from selenium deficiency. It's a wonderful book. He got famous years ago, I think back as far as the 60s. He wrote a book called Dead Doctors Don't Lie. Now, it took me a while to find out why the title, but I've got a CD of his at speech he gave. And he set up a business in latter years marketing mineral supplements for people. And the way he tells it, his wife said to him, look, you're going to get bored staying in hotel rooms, travelling around America and around the world promoting this business. So you'd better find yourself a hobby. Well, he said, I did. And the hobby was studying the obituaries in the American Medical Journal. Right. So what he concluded after some years of doing this was that the average American doctor, male, dies at what age? 57. Yeah. Now, the average American male dies at 77. So if you want to learn how to be healthy, go ask a doctor if you're a fool, right? Yeah, they might have stress, but they might need magnesium. But they wouldn't know that. Anyway, moving on from there. Longevity. In this book, he covers longevity in the 5 places on the planet where people live extra long. They have a lot of people over 100. Now, I sarcastically say to people that if you're a medical researcher, you might conclude, because all of them are around 11,000 feet of altitude, that it must be the air. No, it's not. It's the water. And the water that they use to drink, bathe in, and water their crops with is what is called glacial milk. Because where they are, there are glaciers. And the glacier grinds, it's igneous rock, that's volcanic rock, normally. The glacier grinds away about 4 inches of rock every year, and those minerals go straight into the water, which ends up with a milky colour, but it's rich with minerals. Now that's the main difference in Hokkaido. They eat a lot of seaweed, but then there's a very knowledgeable guy called Jerry Amina who taught me about sea minerals, said seaweed will take up about 19 minerals that it needs, but it doesn't take up what it doesn't, and you might. So the sea minerals are a good bet because they include all of them. But Hokkaido in Japan, the Hunza Valley in northern Pakistan, Azerbaijan in the eastern end of the Black Sea, Ecuador, these are the places where people live healthy long lives, except in Hokkaido lately, the young people aren't. They're eating at McDonald's and they're dying young. And in a few years it'll be a drastic difference that will be observed. The old people live on, young ones are not. They're not healthy. So food has an awful lot to do with it, and it is a free country, of course, and we have free speech, so I can tell you about this. I think it was December 2007. This paper was published in a journal called Clinical Oncology. Australian oncologists criticise chemotherapy. Now these poor guys thought they'd better write a scientific paper for whatever reason, and they thought, great, we'll just find out how good chemotherapy is. And when they got largely through it, they found out how bad chemotherapy was, and so they fudged all the variables at that point. They decided they'd only look at 5-year survivors of cancer, which is a small percentage, and a few other things. They did the unscientific thing and fudged everything, right? But the result was stunning, but not in the way they wanted. The end result was, with the 5-year survivors who had chemo and who didn't, the difference was a life expectancy extension of, with all the fudged variables, guess how much? 2. 2 months after they fudged it, right? So that paper's around. And if anybody, I presume that most of you are here because you want to know about cancer, and that normally means you've got some sad associations in your family or amongst your friends. There's a questionnaire, a few pages that we designed when this charity was operating, and it's got yes, no answers to a series of questions because a lot of people feel absolutely at sea. And I know, when I was lobbed in hospital with a problem, I'm sitting there saying, what on earth is the right thing? People are very much intimidated by going against their doctors' wishes, beliefs. They don't have a lot of facts about some of this, but they have beliefs. So this questionnaire is asking a few questions about what we came to refer as to the cut, burn and poison options that mainstream medicine runs with. We had one young guy who had a football-sized tumour here, which we thought probably came from an injury. He got hit there with a surfboard and cracked a rib. He died. Why he died was because after I spent 2 days on the phone talking to every surgeon I could find between Adelaide and Cairns, not one of them would do what the vet on our board told me he would do if it was a horse. He said, I said, what would you do with this, Chris? He said, if it was a horse. He said, I'd lance it and let the gunk out. It was putrefying faster than his liver could handle. He died. The horse wouldn't have. And I had to tell a surgeon who revels in how much he can mutilate a human and still have them live for a time, I had to tell him how to do it. I said, you've got little devices that you can put in that only need a keyhole, and you've got a camera with it, and you could cut up the necrotic tissue and drain it out, couldn't you? He said, yeah, I suppose you could. Right. Which is exactly the sort of thing a vet would do, although do it more crudely. Deprivation of oxygen to the cells is major. Exercise helps. We used to work with that. But a lot of other things have happened more recently. If I can just find the points I wanted to cover, I'll tell you. If you oxygenate with exercise, drop the sugars and the carbohydrates largely as close to totally as you can out of your diet, you'll be doing quite well. The tyranny of the drug companies is such that you won't get support from mainstream, because the reason I couldn't get a surgeon to do that simple operation was because he said his insurer wouldn't allow him. How ghastly is that? His better judgment might allow him, but his insurance company wouldn't. Now, we still have, or do have, the thought police, and I've run into it a few times. Some years ago, I had to keep the guy who supplies raw milk in business. We had to sue 19 members of the Beattie cabinet because they were telling Parliament to make it completely illegal instead of allowing people to have the kind of milk they wanted. Beattie's brother at the time was head of Parmalat, which may have been coincidental. But they wanted to outlaw milk.
Mention what that is.
Oh, that's the Italian mafia-owned conglomerate that owns dairy industry all around the world. Now, in that process, just as a note for any of you who know about animal breeding, we personally delivered the summonses to all of the Beattie cabinet at their offices. 3 of the women wrote back and said, this is not my portfolio. Had their name on it, said what it was about, and I commented to somebody a bit later that these women were so dumb that they didn't know they'd been served. So, it was an interesting exercise. It actually got me banned from joining the legal profession. Now, if you have friends or family who have problems with their doctor, and as I said earlier, don't know what to do, we can give you the questionnaire, and it simply says, if you are guaranteeing that this won't do me harm, you are guaranteeing that it will get a result, sign here. Never had one signed. Did a fair bit of good though, along the way. Now, there's a few things that I'm aware of that do help with preventing a recurrence of cancer. Vitamin C, maybe 2 grams a day. B group vitamins with additional, and the cheapest way to get that, by the way, is yeast, and you can brewer's yeast, which is a fairly strong taste. You can get Torula yeast, and I've been unable to find if one's better than the other. But Torula, T-O-R-U-L-A, is quite tasty compared to the brewers. If you add extra B1 for stress, and you get that cheaply at any pharmacy, and vitamin E, and the C minerals, this is what I'm saying to people now, with some degree of knowledge, I can say this will be a pretty good way to get rid of your cancer and keep it at bay. You've got to change your lifestyle. You've got to probably do some exercise, and I feel guilty, I'm not back into that yet. But there are a lot of things now coming to light that weren't around before. I'll tell you about two. We'll just have a look at these photos. Now, this relates to skin cancer. You see it up there? We'll just work through it. Can you all read it?
Yep.
Okay. Can you read that?
Yep.
See the little spot on the cheekbone?
Yep.
That's 3 days after we started with what fixes it, which you can buy for a few dollars at the local chemist, I'll tell you. Then this starts happening. Then that. At that stage, I told him he looked like a piece of Kentucky Fried Chicken. Now you see why. Yeah. This process took 28 days. Normally it takes about 21. There you go, day 28, all gone. That it? Yeah. So the last bit is he's in perfect health and just became a father for the first time. Now, that baby is my grandson. I wouldn't have had a grandson. My son wouldn't be alive if we'd trusted doctors. That's fact. He's alive because we got something from a health food shop and created that. Perfect renewal of the flesh. What would have happened if the surgeons had been let loose on something half the size of your little fingernail here? Would they cut it out and then it would recur? Where would it recur? Well, anywhere that you saw the Kentucky Fried Chicken look, right? It would have recurred, and they'd cut that out. And then they'd cut more out. And he would have died. That was extensive enough, he would have died. But he's alive and well and just had his first child. $27 from a health food shop for a little bottle of what is called Traveller's Friend, which is grapefruit seed extract. I had some people from Denmark trying to sell us a product from over there, but it was grapefruit extract, and it didn't work, and they were disappointed. Good guys, but it was grapefruit seed extract that does kill cancer cells if it's accessible to the skin, and it seems like 1 centimetre deep is still accessible, as we were talking earlier about transdermal absorption. Now, the other thing I want to follow through with you, I'll just check that I've covered the ground I wanted to. I don't know, I've got no idea how we're going for time, but if I'm early, we finish a bit early. One of the other things is that the GMO organisms in food are scary, and you've got to avoid them. You really do. I've done a little bit of research on that. I just mentioned that in passing. The almighty dollar rules again. Now, I come to the cruncher. That's what we can do with skin cancer for a few dollars in a chemist. Would you like to know how to not have any cancer or get rid of it if you do?
Yep.
I'm very happy to be able to tell you how, right? And As I said earlier, we mentioned products simply because they're bloody good products. And this is one that's a little bit of a story which I'll relate. There is a biochemist, a professor here in Australia, who found the answer. Who knows what Melaleuca alternifolia is? Tea tree oil. Now, have you known of anybody who drinks it?
No,
Why not?
because I have many colleagues that does.
Well,
It's toxic.
yeah, well, you wouldn't meet anybody that does because they would have died. It's toxic. There's over 100 organic compounds in it, and 4 of them are toxic. What this guy has discovered is how to get the toxins out with a cold press process that doesn't destroy the benefits of the remaining 100 odd compounds. Now, so you can take it orally. And he's actually he's managed to retain half ownership in it. He's spent $10 million over 10 years. And he's had 6 universities in 4 countries prove various aspects of it. If you want some detail, I've got it in a folder here about the tests, what it does, at what concentrations, etc. But an overview is that you can get a capsule a day or up to 3 or 4 if you've got a chronic problem, and it'll handle many things. Who knows what golden staph is? Staph aureus. Hospitals are worried sick about it because they can't stop it. This wipes it out. Dengue fever, there's about 400,000 cases a year in Indonesia, and the research on this was done in the key Indonesian university, I think in Jakarta, by their best doctor in the nation, I gather. And they found out that it wipes out dengue fever, which has a 2% mortality in 400,000 patients a year, which would cost the hospital system an awful lot of money. In India, they have 600,000 cases a year, and they have a much higher mortality, apparently. So we can wipe that out with something that you can buy inexpensively. What the professor got done was TGA approval in Australia, Therapeutic Goods Authority approval here, and FDA, Food and Drug Administration in America, approval, not just for this to be available on prescription, because all the prescription drugs are mainly on prescription because they conflict with other things or they're toxic in some way. This is approved for over-the-counter sale. It's non-toxic. You can have, as far as we know, an unlimited amount of it and it won't hurt you. But if you get 0.15% in your blood, and we're not dead sure how long that takes, it might be a week or 2, that's 15 parts per 1,000. Guess what happens? Lady that was speaking before me, apoptosis, death, 100% of cancer cells. Now, the doctors do something that I've always, since I've known a little bit about cancer, I'm derisive about. That is, we've got 20 different kinds of cancer. Oh, you've got this kind, or you've got that kind. We put a DVD together back a while using some footage from a documentary that went to air on SBS. And they featured cancer, and one of the best autopsy specialists in the world, a German guy, Gunther, and the guy in charge of an oncology hospital in Birmingham in England were doing the autopsy in front of a lecture theatre audience, and they were showing us what happens as they pulled the body apart. But they made the point very, very, very clear. You get cancer in an organ, the doctors tell you, oh, we think we got it all, we cut it out. Yeah, right. It will pop up in the next organ downstream in the blood supply. And if they chop that out, it will then pop up in the next organ downstream in the blood supply. And the doctors know where the blood flows. They can tell you the sequence that you will get it. The guy who was best man at my wedding died at 42 because he got skin cancer, and it became liver cancer. The problem was he just had cancer. They have tested about 15 kinds, and I've got the specifics here if you're interested. 100% knocking out of cancer. But I've got to caution you, you knock it out now, you don't change your habits, and particularly what you eat or fail to eat, fail to ingest, it'll come back. You've got to tell whoever's got cancer, it will come back if you don't change your habits. And you've got to up the nutrients, you've got to know what to put in. But I've given you a very simple way of putting in all the nutrients. Now, the only objection I've had from anybody in the alternative field is, oh, the body only absorbs 10% of those minerals because it's not bioavailable. Big deal, take a bit more. Right? I pay $2 a litre, not 60, right? And it's got all the minerals in it. So it's a good start. So, some of the diseases, golden staph, Ross River fever, I had that diagnosed in June last year. It's gone. I knew exactly what it was like because I'd had chronic fatigue years ago. Why? Because I had candida. Didn't know, doctors didn't know, wiped it out in 3 days with the right pharmaceutical. But then you've got to change your diet so you don't get it back. So I knew what chronic fatigue was. That was Ross River fever. It was pretty short-lived. Didn't linger because it got wiped out. I was on this product. Now the product, how I know about it was because I've got good friends who are multi-level marketers and very successful ones going back 20 years. And they were approached by somebody they knew who's a mutual friend of the professor that created this. And they spoke for a couple of months, I gather, intensively, and they were asked to market it by him. And they said, look, we can do it, but it'll take us about 2 years to gear up. So how about you talk to the guy that we are now dealing with one of our businesses, who happens to be local in Queensland. He's intelligent, he's not arrogant, he's cashed up, he does it right, and he's got a complementary business that this would just fit into, selling 80 products, multi-level marketed, but it's got 80 products, it's been going for 3 years, and there's no warts on it. Now, I helped these people sue one of the big pharmaceutical multi-level marketing companies because they did nasty things like when you get to earn $300,000 a year, the company grabs your distributorship and says you're a bad fellow and you're out. That's not on, but they do it. So I learned a bit about it then. These people said the right thing. Go talk to the guy that's just right for you. And he did. And now we have this product on the market. It's known as MALX, M-A-L-X, which stands for Melaleuca alternifolia extract. Now, if you look at the visuals we've got here, compared to raw Melaleuca, you might have to take 10,000 units to handle a particular problem. Of the extract, the concentrate, you might need 50 instead of 10,000 units. So it's extremely potent. It's selected for being so. You can order it by mail, and it gets in express post. You'll get it the next day. Buy 60 capsules. I'm taking one a day just as a backup. It's also a tremendous immune boost. I've been taking everything I could find as it came out new and different for knocking out free radicals, which is the prime cause of ageing. And I've learnt today about magnesium, thank you. But the free radicals, the best you can get until recently was krill oil. Astaxanthin has come along more recently. I've just put that aside because I'm now taking this. It's about 50 times better than krill oil for antioxidant effect. Now, it's also inexpensive, $44 if you're a distributor, which is easy to do. 30% more if you don't want to be signed up with them. But it's really, really simple. The only thing to remember is you take it with food, otherwise you get that slight taste of tea tree oil which makes you feel a bit nauseous. But take it with food and it's not a problem. So we have this. It might, I think, be, it was done this way because the professor knew that if the drug companies got their hands on it, it's a bit like running cars on water. The public will never hear any more about it. It will not make the market. They'll pay a lot of money to suppress it. And he was not going to have that happen. So this was the solution that has been taken. It was only launched late last year. It might be like the cure for stomach ulcers that would take 20 years to penetrate the medical profession and the general population. On the other hand, we've got half our population due to get cancer. And I haven't been trying. I'm very busy with other legal stuff. But we're starting to get some commission back and lots of people talking about it and people coming because nearly everybody knows somebody with a cancer problem. And so I'm very happy to mention this to you today. I think we've got enough. I think Kate's just handed out where you can get it and what you have to do to get it. But I'm happy to answer questions now. Yeah?
How does Traveller's Friend compare to the black salve?
About the same, it seems. Yeah, but the black salve's just been pushed off the market.
Yeah. Well, I can make it. What's Traveller's Friend made of?
Grapefruit seed extract.
Oh, that's right.
It's still on the market. The guy had about 6 or 7 or 8 products made from grapefruits, and I had helped him fight the TGA to keep it on the market, and he ended up just with this one because it's sold as a water purifier for travellers.
Grapefruit seed extract
Yeah.
can be bought from New Directions in Sydney,
Yeah,
and it's used as a preservative for
Yep.
cosmetics.
yep, wouldn't doubt it. Okay, so you'll find them on the net, I guess.
Yep.
The ones that we get are imported from America, but sold as that product name.
You can get it in Nambour. You can get it in most health food shops, and it's sold as a waterproof purifier. So that's why it's called Traveller's Friend, because when you go overseas, you can use it to make sure the water's safe to drink.
A few drops in a glass of water and you...
Peroxide.
Yeah, yeah. So we don't know how quickly this will take off, but for those of you that have need or know people who have need, it's there. And I stress this is not to underrate the importance of a good diet free of bad stuff. And that seems to be the main cause of why we've got a 50-fold increase in cancer pretty much in our lifetime, unless you're a lot younger than me. There you go. So, any other questions? The grapefruit seed extract, yes. You just moisten the area daily. Now, if it doesn't react in 3, play safe, 4 days, it's not cancer. That's the other thing the doctors don't have, 100% diagnostic tool. If it doesn't react in 3 or 4 days, it's not cancer. Well, I'm guessing a centimetre. I've learnt through some things that happen that anything you put on the skin's likely to penetrate a centimetre, maybe more. Yeah, as we're talking about absorption. So if it's close to the skin, yes. We've got one bloke at the moment who's his ex-wife's trying to poison him, put Roundup and 2,4,5-T in his water tank. He's on a rural property and he's been quite sick. And the doctors won't investigate because Medicare doesn't pay for the testing involved. But we've had him on this for a bit. And he sort of forgot to tell me, he's got an ear that's got this thing on it the size of a golf ball. And he forgot to tell me that it's gone from hard to spongy and it's oozing putrid fluid. That means it's dying, right? But he forgot to tell me. That happens. Any other questions? Yeah. Yep.
What I found is it can get very painful.
Yep.
So if you actually dilute it, and this is what I was told to do, with apricot kernel oil, which is also a high concentrate of B17 in it.
Yep.
So you're killing the cancer as well. But it actually penetrates a lot deeper with the apricot oil as well. So
From what I know, I'd endorse that as an excellent idea. I wish I'd known it. What happened with my son was that he just had a day off here and there because it was painful. But that would be much better. And B17 for a long time, since 1951, has been known as something that will help kill cancer.
even down at 50-50.
Yep.
50 Traveller's Friends, 50 apricot kernel oil, you will get the reaction and it's still massive. I mean, I had a football out on my neck, in football. But the apricot kernel oil kept the pain factor into a gentleness. It wasn't anywhere near like putting it on.
I just learnt that. Thank you. That's great. Yeah. So you all hear it.
Could you repeat that for the mic just in case?
Yes, what we've just been talking about is if and when the traveller's friend in the process of dealing with the skin cancer gets very painful, the only solution we knew is to have a day off, which means that in the case I illustrated, it took 28 days, not 21. But we've just been hearing about somebody who went through the process successfully and probably better, because when it got too painful, she substituted 50-50 or thereabouts apricot kernel oil and backed off on the amount of traveller's friend, the grapefruit seed extract. Now both things are carcinogens, or they're toxic to cancer. And I believe from what we've just heard that the oil penetrates very well, perhaps better than the grapefruit seed extract, but that would be a much better way of handling the painful periods. So whilst most cancer patients are prepared to put up with a lot of pain, that's a better way if you need a bit of a respite, and it'll still keep doing the job. Thank you.
If I can offer a solution to pain, which may appear as a plug for my own product, but it is the world's only magnesium chloride infused cream, and it works like cortisone without the side effects, and that it penetrates the skin, will reduce, if not eliminate, pain and swelling, and speed up the healing process by providing the broad spectrum of all those C-trace elements in the healing process.
Fantastic. We're not the ABC. We don't have to freak out if somebody mentions a product. What's its name?
It's the electromagnesium cream.
Electromagnesium
which
cream.
4 years ago, and it's the only one in the world, and no one else has been able to.
And it reduces majorly the pain of what we talked about.
Yeah, like
Okay.
cortisone without the side effects.
Fantastic.
It's the magnesium infused in the oils. The oils are a carrier of magnesium to the skin because the lipids soak up the magnesium, which would be the same thing happening with the apricot kernel oil.
Yep.
One of the ingredients in the cream, because the skin just sucks it in.
Yep.
So the grapeseed extract will go with the apricot kernel oil through the skin, as does the magnesium using those plant fats.
So it's purpose designed to be well absorbed.
Yes,
Yeah.
the more hydrated with oil water emulsion the skin, the better the absorption rate.
Okay.
It's 12 times more absorbed through the skin as it is orally.
Better absorption
12
per
times.
unit quantity,
12
12 times better than oral. Okay, I'm learning about that. All right,
You
anything?
sample later.
Yeah, anything else? Because I've covered the ground I basically wanted to, but there's a lot more you could say. But the thing to stress really is get your diet right, get rid of the carbohydrates, get rid of the sugars, and that includes fruit, except maybe some fruit after you're over the hump with the cancer problem. So there are, as I said, I've found 40 odd nutrients that are said by internet research. Now that's not bad. Everybody used to sling off at Wikipedia, but now they trust it. It's not bad. You can, if I've got 3 or 4 papers saying something, I'll start believing it. So there's a whole range of things, but I do say the C minerals I think is a great start because it's broad spectrum and it hits many things that you might not even know you're deficient in. So I think we're going to have an early lunch. I covered that quicker than I thought I would. Thank you. Right, you got the memory stick?
Thank you very much. That was fantastic. I think we've heard a lot of different views and different perspectives from Bruce. I enjoyed it really much, and hopefully later on we'll have more discussion. Well, thank you very much for your listening for now. We're going to go for a break, for a lunch break. If anybody's hungry, we're going to have half an hour break for lunch, and Keith will be the presenter after lunch, so he will set up while you guys can interact with each other. Thank you very much. Oh, just one more thing. We got some books in the back. It's all about basically cancer, all different information. please, you feel free to have a look at them if you're interested, but not to take. Thank you.